The live stream is started. Welcome to this meeting of the Connected Community Scrutiny Committee being held on Wednesday the 19th of July 2023. Quick note, fire and emergency evacuation. For those present in the meeting room, if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest exit and make your way to the fire and make your way in the car park. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. And the Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and is making a recording. Hello to everybody who's watching. Thank you for your interest. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record public meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If there are any members of the public present who do not wish to be filmed, but we have no members of the public present currently. Only committee members present in the meeting room may vote, and we have a number of people in attendance as virtual participants. Welcome, and can I request that you use the raise hand function within the system if you wish to contribute, and introduce yourself when you are called upon. Thank you. So we have the agenda in front of us. Number one, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Williams.
Any other apologies? No. Named substitute item 2, Councillor Alan Williams is substituting for Councillor Rob Williams. Welcome, Alan. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any interest in any agenda item? Currently none. Item 4, minutes of the last meeting. The minutes document of the meeting held on the 13th of February 2023 is included in the agenda on pages 13 to 24 for approval. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer, although I have notified to the clerk a few minor textual matters of accuracy, which we will address after the meeting. Subject to that, are you content that I sign the minutes with an accurate record? Now, obviously, I don't think any of us were in attendance at that meeting because we weren't part of the committee at that point, and nor was I, but I've been invited. Councillor Lester was. Let's confirm that they're an accurate record of the meeting. Marvellous, thank you. It is convention that as the new chair, I sign those minutes, so we'll continue to do so. Item 5, questions from members of the public. A question has been received from a member of the public, Nina Shield. A response from the Cabinet Member Community Services and Asset, Councillor Bramer, has been published in the supplement to the agenda papers. The questioner has the opportunity to submit a written supplementary question or join the meeting to ask their supplementary question live. Supplementary questions are to be no more than 1 minute in length and must include a question. Can I ask the clerk to confirm if a supplementary question is to be asked?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Nina Sheet compliments a supplementary question which I'll share on screen. And read out stuff there. So, unfortunately, I can't attend the meeting, but I would like to submit the following supplementary questions of part 2 of the questions and responses. With the adult library and children's library planned to be 2 floors apart, with a subsequent potential for safeguarding issues, will the library team be increased in number to adequately cover both areas?
Councillor Bramer.
Yes, the response.
Councillor Bramer, could I request you to put your mic on so that everybody can hear?
Yes, can that all be heard? Nobody here?
No. Your mic actually working?
I don't know. It would appear to be. It's got red. Is that working? Is that working?
I'll bring it a bit closer to you.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Right, so shall I shout or just okay?
We just need to make sure everybody can hear you online and in the room.
Of course. The response to the secondary supplementary question from Nina Stewart is that the design of the library within the Shire Hall has not yet been developed. However, the staffing establishment will need to be designed around the agreed service model, and that the member of the public can be assured that the new library will be adequately staffed as necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Raymer. Right, let's move on to the substance of the meeting. The big agenda item 7, pre-decision scrutiny of the forthcoming Cabinet decision on review of new Hereford Library and Learning Resource Centre location. The purpose of this meeting is to undertake pre-decision scrutiny of this proposed decision. I note that I think there's some useful text in paragraph 5 of the committee report on page 26, which outlines what the council needs to do when it takes a decision, including being clear about what the council wants to happen and how it will be achieved. Item A. Item E, give due weight to all material considerations. Give the reasons for the decision, and G, follow proper procedures. Other items, and this is an opportunity to ask a number of questions to ensure or to scrutinise whether all of those things have indeed been done. Councillor Bramer, in your capacity as Cabinet Member of Community Services and Assets, would you care to make an opening statement?
Only to say that the first thing I would say is that I would applaud the team effort that Amy Pitt has put together to make the report in 6 or 8 weeks or whatever it's been, and the thoroughness of the report, I think, speaks for itself. As far as finding Shire Hall as the potentially chosen venue, I'm absolutely delighted to think that the iconic building will be brought back into service for a real purpose, and that the library going there has the opportunity far more to become a world-class library, along with, of course, the Broad Street Museum becoming a world-class museum, and over the years, those two buildings will have a purpose that I'm sure will be an accolade for the county. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Councillor Bramer. I thought it would be useful for those in the room and also those online, just for us to understand who is in the room apart from the members of the committee. Is that useful? So can I ask everyone who here from the Cabinet and the Officer side to briefly introduce themselves?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Stoddart. I'm the Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Services.
Jonathan Lester, Leader of the Council. Ian Biggs, Cabinet Member for Economy and Growth.
Councillor Harry Bramer, Communities, well, I used to call it contracts and assets. Can we just keep the old way? It's community.
Your title is Community Services and Assets.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Community Services and Assets.
Amy Pitt, Director of Strategy and Performance.
Roger Ibe, Service Director for Economy and Growth. Ross Cook, Corporate Director for Economy and Environment.
Thank you all. Do we not have anybody attending from finance?
Chair, we did invite somebody.
Rachel Parks is online. Rachel's just on the screen now.
Good morning, everybody.
Great.
We have some other officers online as well in the same session. So we have Sarah Jarrett, Strategic Delivery Manager, and also David Jones, Programme Manager, Susan White, Senior Project Manager.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Right. As I think people can imagine, the committee has made questions on this topic, and we are looking forward to engaging with you, Cabinet and officers, on this matter today. Thank you for the report and the introduction. I would also note that the ward member for Central Ward, in whose ward it sits, is also in attendance, and if you wish to speak at any point, Councillor Gennard, please indicate the meeting chair's discretion. You want me to do so. I think what I propose today is that we go through a set of issues rather than page by page through the report, but a set of issues which have been raised by committee members, including the consultation that has taken place, the justification for leading Maylords, justification for going to the Shire Hall, the costs of going to the Shire Hall, and a range of risks of the impacts on Maylords and future Maylords, and finally some questions of process. I hope that sounds okay with everybody. So let's begin with questions on the consultation process. Members, who has a question on this subject? Okay, Councillor Baker.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wondered how wide was the consultation with stakeholders regarding placing the library at the Shire Hall rather than at Maylords? The stakeholders that were consulted in the report, there was, I can give you those now, the Joint Action for Herefordshire Libraries, Herefordshire Cultural Partnership, the University NMIT, Department of Culture, Media and Sport, Hereford BID, Thomas Towns Board, Board Member, Hereford City Council, I think, oh yes, of course. No, that's it as far as I'm aware.
Just a note on process. Could I perhaps suggest that we don't just read out material from the report? We assume that we've all taken that and read. So answers to questions should provide additional clarification.
Is there additional clarification you require? No. Thank you.
Councillor Driscoll.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, some of you will be aware that I've got some concerns ever being heard. Some of you are aware that I've got some concerns around the process of consultation, specifically around the consultation with the Herefordshire Cultural Partnership. I'm delighted with the idea of bringing the Shire Hall back to life, but I do think it has to be done in the right way. And the idea of establishing, as you say in bold, an outstanding and vibrant cultural hub which brings arts, culture and entertainment to a showpiece centre is very admirable, but we already have quite a vibrant cultural hub in the courtyard, and the impact on the business plan of the courtyard, I think, needs to be taken very carefully into consideration when creating what could potentially be a competitive venue in very close proximity. There are only so many people that go to the theatre and see people buy tickets for whatever kind of event, be it children's entertainment, be it exhibitions, all of which are provided at the courtyard already. Now, I understand the Herefordshire Cultural Partnership were once consulted. However, I do know, I've emailed Chief Executive of the Courtyard, Ian Archer, and he has confirmed that he was not aware of these plans and was not consulted. So my question is, who was consulted at the Herefordshire Cultural Partnership? Were they fully aware of the plans to create a new flagship performance arts space alongside the library? And has the potential impact on the courtyard been properly thought through? And do you have plans for how you might be consulting with the courtyard on this moving forward? I don't know if that's a question for you.
Yep, I'm happy to cover that one.
Thank you.
So, the cultural partnership, we, due to the sort of, I suppose, the timescale, we didn't unfortunately have a kind of full briefing meeting with them. What we had was we sent out some information to them to inform them of the decision that was coming. Obviously, at this time, the decision report hadn't been published, so we could only give them a bit of an overview of the criteria that we were going to look at and what we were trying to consider as part of this strategic review. The courtyard is, obviously, as you know, is part of the cultural partnership. I have actually made contact with the chief exec, and I'm due to meet with him once he's back from leave to discuss this further with him. Obviously, as part of this, what we're trying to do is absolutely enable and enhance the cultural offer within Herefordshire, not to look for any impact on any services. So yes, I mean, we will be absolutely engaging further as part of the full business case with more partners as part of this next stage. But we did, like I say, we did engage with the cultural partnership as part of that.
So when you say you engaged with the cultural partnership,
Yeah.
you informed them of the likely decision that will be taking place?
We informed them that a decision was going to be coming regarding the change of or possible change of location. Because obviously at the time the decision paper had not been published.
No.
So the paper was only published last week. So we informed them of the criteria, and they were looking at a set of locations across Hereford, and did they have some input into it?
And were they aware did you make them aware that there were plans to turn Shire Hall into a performance space?
We gave them an overview in terms of what we were looking for regarding the vision and the aims around the cultural space.
Okay.
But obviously, like I said, because the detail wasn't there to be able to share, and this is what we will absolutely do as the next step to ensure that we work closely with all of our cultural partners in this.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Chair. Yes.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Biggs, do you want to shout?
Yeah, could I just add to that? I think certainly from my understanding and current understanding, this is a standalone library and educational space is the project we're really concerned with at the moment, as opposed to it being a wider venue and that side of things. So certainly that's the thrust of the project.
Okay, thank you. But if you look in the strategic review, it's sold in bold on the first page as being a cultural hub, bringing the arts, culture, and entertainment specifically together. That's a major. That's the USP, if you like, of moving it to Shire Hall. So I am slightly concerned if we're going to backpedal on that a little bit. Either this is part of the reason why it's important to move to Shire Hall, or it isn't.
You remember the original cultural hub had Encore and Powerhouse and all in that same space. We will obviously be doing other cultural elements within the Shire Hall, but I certainly don't see the concern of performance in that sense being one of the core. But certainly as we build up the business case, the core will be right at the centre of those complications. Be assured of that.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the Cabinet, what was the big reason, the benefits, of putting the library in Shire Hall? What's the main benefit, please?
Well, the main benefit is that it uses an iconic building. It brings into life a 250-year-old building that has seen better days. And of course, it enables the library to have something like twice the amount of space given to it that was available in Maylord's Orchard.
Could I just check back to it,
Please.
The actual increase in space, I think, is 27.5%.
It's not the figures that I've received.
The figures in the paper you've given us.
The paper that I have worked from is that there's 7,500 square feet of space at Shire Hall as opposed to 3,650 square feet at Maylord's Orchard. Not 27% increase, but actually twice the size.
Those aren't the figures in the paper that you've given us. Published. Perhaps we can come back to this later.
Perhaps we should.
But it raises a concern about whether you're working from information that we've not in the published report. Why there's an inconsistency.
So mine.
This one works.
No, I think you have to break down the uses, so you'll have an area for skills and training. Let's not forget, it's a library and learning centre. You've got the library section, you've got the learning and skills centre, and you will have the training rooms as well. So it's the whole package. And so to answer Councillor Williams' point, you're going to have more space. So the book lending floor area for Maylord's 2.266 square metres, whereas in Shire Hall it's 404 square metres. But the point is, just take, for example, the fact that it's a learning and skills centre, and you've got 2 proposed rooms in Maylord Orchard for training, but you would have up to 6 in the Shire Hall. So that just gives a broader scope to be able to do lots of different training as such. And the skills training area, you see the comparison. It's 122 square metres for Maylords, but in the Shire Hall it would be 357. So I think Councillor Brainerd was quoting the overall floor space.
Absolutely, I thought was the question. Sorry if it wasn't.
So just breaking that down, there's a breakdown of the space, but I think it nicely illustrates the fact that it's a library and learning centre, and there's different spaces for different activities.
Thank you, Councillor. I refer you to page 47 of the report, which specifies that the Shire Hall proposal, 861.98 square metres versus the Maylords 674.3 square metres target, which is achieved. The difference is 27.9%.
Yeah. I think the difference, Gareth, it's okay to clarify, is that the Maylords project obviously included the atrium area as well as the library. So the comparison of figures that we've just gone through, I think, is related to the specific floor space for the library itself, being Maylords and Shire Hall, and the learning resource centre in Maylords and the learning space in Shire Hall. But the wider area, the difference will be disparity between those two figures will be the atrium refurbishment in Maylords.
So it's a little concerning that the report doesn't specify any of this detail.
It specifies in paragraph 26 and 14 those things that will be available using the space and could be used for, and it's quite an impressive list in my view. That's in paragraphs 26 and 14 of the report.
My recollection is that paragraph 26, paragraph 14 specifies a whole range of things that could potentially be done, but subject to permission and funding. So they're not actually what we're doing or considering here. They're a set of blue sky thinking ideas. I think we need to remain focused on what the concrete proposal is that we're investigating here, scrutinising, and what the evidence is that supports that concrete proposal. We are still supposedly considering questions under the heading of consultation. Councillor Proctor, question on that subject?
I do. Can you give us a sense of what you learned during the consultation and how it changed the final proposal?
During the consultation, I spoke myself to the library user group, and it was surprising to me to learn that the chairman of the library user group was delighted that we weren't planning, in his view, I mean, to use his words, thank heavens you're not going to Shire Hall, we never did like that space. Sorry, we never did like Maynard's. We are delighted that you're going to Shire Hall. And I was amazed to hear it, but I just listened to it and I thanked the gentleman for his views. Since then, I've had a number of people who were involved in the consultation coming to me and giving me a similar kind of comment. So I was surprised, but I must admit that the Shire Hall is a very imposing building, and Maylords is really a retail or commercial place. And so I'm not surprised at that, but it wasn't in my mind when we set out down this trail. And it came out in the consultation from people I spoke to personally. I'm not sure if Amy had any other people that she spoke to who reviewed their view.
Yeah, of course. So we did obviously obviously put some areas where people wanted us to consider. Certainly some of which has been brought up, I think, before, was around the entertainment space. I think I'd like to also just highlight this was part of before we'd done the sort of detailed review and what we can share in terms of the detailed review. So now we're sort of at the stage where we've got that, and obviously if subject to approval tomorrow, we can go and do absolutely a lot more engagement and discussion around what people would like to see in there, what kind of space, how do we use it. So, I mean, there was a mixed bag. There was, certainly a lot of positives in terms of the use of the building, bringing that building back into use and into that cultural opportunity and putting the library really in that historic building. But like I said, there were some areas in terms of they've asked us to consider around things like the entertainment space in the building as well. So yeah, but like I said, it was at a stage where it had to be sort of at a high level because it is a strategic review that's been undertaken at this point.
Sorry, just the things that they would like you to consider. Do you mean that people were asking for entertainment space, or that?
I think there was that kind of that element of that, obviously it does provide currently what has previously provided entertainment space there. So, how is that going to continue going forward? And also, like I said, that's something we'll consider further as part of the next stage of this review. And working absolutely with partners across the county in terms of those offers as well.
Thank you. Is this specifically on consultation?
Just a point of clarification. It was the questioner, the member of the public from Ledbury, mentioned that the plans for the Maylord Library would be on 2 floors, with the main adults library 1 floor and the children's on another floor. And I don't remember reading that in the actual report. Is that actually the case?
So in terms of the Maylord design, it was split between 2 floors. So the adult library was going to be on the top floor, and proposed on the top floor, and then the library space on the bottom floor for the children's. Yes, that was the Maylord.
Yes, that's right. I don't remember reading that in the report.
Okay, I mean, yes, I mean, obviously we've got a number of different reports previously on Maylords, which I'm absolutely happy to circulate afterwards, but that was the proposed design, yeah.
The full design for Maylord's project is publicly available in papers for previous cabinet and full council meetings.
Yes, I don't remember reading that.
I mean, this brings me on to a point I was already on the process actually, but the decision paper in front of us today specifies that there are no background papers. That seems extremely surprising to me. There are clearly a number of relevant papers. My understanding is background papers that have been relied on to come to the conclusions and recommendations in the report. And there are a number of items, not just background papers like the non-council papers you're referring to, but for example costings that are not attached to the report. Why is it that there are no background papers named in the report?
So there are a number of appendices within the report, obviously to support the, and obviously we've now issued a supplementary paper regarding the costings.
Which itself relies on a document that is referred to that reviews costings, which is surely a background paper.
I mean, with regards to the background papers, like I say, obviously there's a number of appendices within this. I mean, obviously, as part of the consideration today, if there's anything further that we need to include or circulate, we'd be happy to look at that.
There is indeed, and we'll come on to the final questions shortly. Thank you. Right, I think we've dealt with consultation. Let's move on to Maylord's specific questions, particularly the need to leave Maylord's, or the justification for leaving Maylord's and what may happen to it in the future. I've got a question on this. Any others wishing to indicate? I'll say my five later. Councillor Proctor, go ahead.
What is the plan for Maylord's? What is the plan for Maylord's, assuming the library does move to Sharp Hall?
Well, clearly for the next 5 years, clearly for the next 5 years, the DWP will be continuing their time there. Then there's a significant demand for retail and commercial space in Maylord's, and that will be let for the purposes of its original intention.
I'm no expert on retail, but on your figures, leaving aside the 5 units that are kept at the library, there's over 20% vacant units in Maylord's at the moment. So what do you regard as significant demand? When would we see, 95% occupation? Would that be a sign of significant demand?
I'm not myself in retail either, but I would think that I'm advised that the significant demand is outstripping the national trend of retail space in Hereford, and therefore if there's an 80% occupancy, it's because of some space being retained by this council for the use of Maylord's. As soon as that is released back into the marketplace, the 80% should go up. That's all I can tell you at this stage.
Can I Coming on then, to clarify, Councillor Bramer, the figures in your own report show that 14 out of 41 units in Maylaws are currently empty. That's a vacancy rate of 34%. The vacancy rate for Hereford as a whole is 17.5%, and that in turn is higher than the national high street vacancy rate, which is 13.8%. Given that the vacancy rate in Maylaws is twice the level for Hereford, on what basis can you claim that demand for units in Maylaws is high?
What I'm claiming is that the interest in Maylaws Orchard, if there is not a library there, is greater than as reflected by your own statistics. That's what I'm being advised.
Councillor Bramer, these are your statistics in your report that provide a very different picture from the claim that is made about the demand for Maylaws. Indeed, the Town Centre Assessment Report that was produced and published by the Council last year. Have you read that report?
I'd like to say that the report to which you refer is accurate at the time that the report was written. Where I'm coming from is giving information with regard to the demand and the inquiry levels that we're receiving for Maylaws Orchard. And that is not the same thing as what the report that was written 6 or 8 months ago.
Yeah, your report is relying on a claim about increases in inquiries in a 3-month period this year. I do believe that could be said to have been cherry-picked and not a sound basis for making a decision that could potentially expose this council to millions of pounds of financial risk.
You have to remember that several of the units were allocated towards the library and have been left vacant or unattended because of that. When you add that back into the equation, and you add back in the welfare organisations that are looking currently at Maylaws, I think that we will go far better than the national average, but we can't at the moment. You may not agree, but that's my view.
Councillor Bramer, we can't make decisions just on the basis of somebody's view. Decisions have to be on the basis of evidence, and the evidence is that even if we discount the units that are currently vacant because they are planned for the library, the vacancy rate in Maylaws is still 25%, which is significantly higher than the rate in Hereford as a whole and twice the national average. The Town Centre Assessment Report pointed out that vitality in the Maylaws area is lower than other parts of the city. In fact, that was part of the justification for putting the library there in the first place, was it not to regenerate that part of the town centre? So I repeat the question, what evidence is your claim in paragraphs 11 and 12 that there is a need to keep the Maylaws unit for retail based on, other than that very brief claim about expressions of interest over the last 3 months?
Maybe a very brief claim about expressions of interest over the last 3 months, but it actually makes a tremendous difference to Maylaws. The fact that people and organisations are looking for large areas within a commercial or retail environment. And I'm sorry if you don't like what you hear or what you say or what I've said, but that is the figures on which I'm working.
I'm working entirely on the figures in your own report, Councillor Bramer. It's not a question of whether I like it, I'm scrutinising whether you have the evidence to support your claim that there is a need to retain Maylaws for retail.
If I could, Chair, number one, I think the officers need to rely on their agents to advise them and dealing on a national basis, and I think that's what they've drawn down those comments from. And looking at this from its full commercial sense rather than purely retail is I think going to help us going forward. Obviously, there's some question marks over Maylaws with the library, and is the library going there? Is it not going there? And that's going to confuse things as well at the moment. So I think the answer to your question is we're relying on an agent's advice to pull that from the report, and I think we have got to do better. I think it's a fair challenge that we do need to do better in managing that commercial space and realising it for all it can be. At the heart of this, remember, is can we create the best library and learning space we can for the counties? That's the objective with Shire Hall. That gives us a natural consequential challenge in Maylaws of how can we realise that to its full commercial commercial value. And personally, I accept your challenge on that.
Is it okay to start in terms of the regeneration benefit, if we don't mind? So that when the decision was taken to look at mail loads originally, it was during the COVID period and just after COVID, where no one quite knew what the impact on retail was going to be, and in fact the projections nationally and locally were fairly dire. And I think what we're saying is that projection kind of drop-off hasn't happened, that actually Hereford's done reasonably well, and that there continues to be a demand for retail in the city centre. The idea behind having the library was to drive footfall and to benefit all businesses in the city centre, not just mail lords. And now we've got, since the decision was taken in 2020 to put the library into mail lords, we've had Shire Hall become a redundant building, a kind of a boarded up building right in the heart of the city centre, which again doesn't look good and doesn't create an attractive place for trade in the city centre. So I think one of the things that we've looked at through the review is trade didn't drop off to quite the same extent as was expected on the back of the impact of COVID. It does remain challenging, and it will, but actually the regeneration benefits of driving footfall into the city centre could be delivered by Shire Hall and still benefit by having commercial units available in the city centre through mail lords. So that's the overall view with the strategic review of the options we've looked at.
So if I understand it, essentially, everything's going quite well, and mail lords will continue to thrive with a bit of marketing effort. So the plan for mail lords, which was my original question, is to carry on with it as a shopping centre. Is that?
I think it's worthwhile. So the tenants are reporting strong sales. That's really important and great news for us. And I think it's true to say that one of the tenants that was asked to leave, to vacate, has asked to return. So yes, it's not all doom and gloom for Maple.
And are there plans to invest in mail? So I'm thinking in particular that the escalators are supposed to be end of life, and that was going to be part of the library project. So yeah, well, I'm not trying to be difficult here. I'm just trying to get a sense of what the cabinet plans to do with this building. We're going to talk about what it plans to do with the other building, but what does it plan to do with this building? And
on the point about the escalators, if they've reached the end of their life and the building is to continue, of course, they will have to be replaced. And I don't need to give you an assurance that you would expect anybody who's responsible for property to ensure that they are up to standard, and of course they will be required. We will be really returned to a standard whereby they can be used by the public.
I can agree with well that it's part of the capital funding. We have £1 million assigned to upgrade and work with Millwall this year.
I have a question, but go ahead, Frank.
Well, one of the things I was just going to ask, Mellor Orchard is part of Hereford City Centre, and as such, the whole of Hereford City Centre needs something to bring people back into it. So many people have said, I'm not going to shop in Hereford anymore, the traffic is terrible, and I feel that the people of Hereford don't feel that their city centre is loved enough by the council. Would you agree that putting the library into Shire Hall is going to show the public we do care about Hereford, and not just generate new business into mail lords, but introduce new and fill the shops that are currently standing empty throughout the city centre and giving people no wanting to go into the city centre at all? Could you believe that the library placed in Shire Hall will be one of those attractions that drives people in?
Yeah, indeed, my vision is that we have a world-class library and we have a world-class museum, two buildings, both in the city centre, and will be a major attraction to people to come to Hereford. As far as Maylord is concerned, we will, of course, refurbish Maylord, and I would like to see that to much greater occupancy than it is now. But the library the prospect of the library going there has made it that certain areas have not been able to be let because they've been kept clear, and other areas people are thinking, well, it would really be an attraction for us to have a library next door to my store. as it's, without going into names, one organisation, as has been said today, has asked to come back, and now it's been mooted that the library may not be going to Maylords. So, all in all, I think that we have two world-class organisations as the offer for Herefordshire, and we also have a very vibrant Maylords. But we'll wait to see how long that takes to happen. Thank you for your question, Councillor.
I'm keen to move on to the practicalities of how that inspiring vision, Councillor Bramer, might be achieved. But Councillor Leslie, you wanted to contribute quickly?
Well, just to add to Councillor Bramer's point, to answer Councillor Cornthwaite's point, yes, we have to absolutely provide facilities and star attractions to bring people into Hereford from Herefordshire, from outside of Herefordshire, and for the benefit of people who live in Hereford itself. And, I'm very, very proud of the Shire Hall as a fantastic iconic building. And if subject to business case, and if the decision is made to go ahead with putting the Library and Learning Centre into Shire Hall, I think it will be a very big draw. I mean, the building sells itself, and the scope and the opportunities that will arise if we use the building sells itself. And the benefit of that, it would be, in my view, an opportunity to have something that's iconic and standalone and complementary to the museum, but complementary to all of the other attractions in Hereford City. And I think that would be a very important draw for people to celebrate in an iconic building. And just to add that if that was the outcome for the Shire Hall, that frees up the opportunity for commercial activity to happen in Maylord that would bring investment into the heart of the city itself and be another draw in itself. So you'd be getting your cake and eat it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. I would like to move on to discussing the costs. Let's first discuss the costs of cancelling the proposed cancellation of the Maylord Library project. So the report showed in paragraph 36 and 37 that the costs already incurred are 684,000, plus at least 86,000 and potentially up to 608 for demobilisation costs. So that's nearly £1.3 million that it will cost to cancel the Maylord Library project. £1.3 million spent on something that is not going forward. Where will this £1.3 million need to come from?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So the 1.3 million you say is the worst possible case. The figure of 684k is the sunk cost that's already gone in. What I would say there is that work that has already been carried out, includes surveys and elements like that. That will be that is not costs that cannot be used elsewhere. There will be those projects and reports will be passed on to the programming officers, who, as I said to Councillor Fox, we're bringing plans into Maylord this year already. That will be into the programme office, and we can do further work around here as well. So those reports, etc., are useful for the future as we go forward. What I would, however, say is that we're not taking a short-term view here. We're now taking the right long-term financial and strategic vision. Therefore, it's a longer-term, more than 5-year plan that we have to put the library into Shire Hall, and therefore those costs will be then absorbed into the programme.
So effectively, the cost of putting the library into Shire Hall, already start that £1.3 million potentially before you started doing any work on Shire Hall.
As you say, the costs that are assigned at 1.3. It's actually, I do not agree with that. I think at the minute it's 600k.
Plus definitely at least 86, so it's at least 760,000 definitely incurred, and up to nearly 1.3 million.
But probably still to be discussed with the contractor.
It certainly counts as a major financial risk, though, does it not?
It is.
£750,000 in itself.
I agree.
Best part of £1 million.
I agree.
And where will that money come from? Reserves.
Eventually, it'll be part of the overall funding cost, which we'll get onto later, will be coming from future capital programmes. And as you say, that cost will be refunded and taken care of.
Okay. So you're happy to spend up to £1.3 million on cancelling a project that literally was shovel ready, £3.5 million shovel ready project?
I would disagree that it's shovel ready. What I would say is that
It's almost about to be implemented, was it not?
what we have here is
Rebate 3+.
we have projects that have, this has taken care, we've done this sort of thing before, and I'm sure many other councils will do it in the future. What we're taking is a strategic view that the Shire Hall move is a better long-term financial strategic vision for the people of Herefordshire.
Okay, and what evidence do you base that belief?
That the longer-term vision, as alluded to by my cabinet colleagues, is that it's a longer-term vision and it's a better outcome for the people of Herefordshire.
But it's an entirely uncosted vision.
No, it's fully costed, as you've now got the papers in front of you.
It's certainly not fully costed. The information that was shared with councillors last night at 7:19 p.m. is a 4-line table with absolutely no breakdown. And I'm about to come on to the questions, many questions about the figure. It's not a fully costed proposal, and that is indeed acknowledged in.
I would say it's fully costed as at this time, with the knowledge that we have as we stand at the minute. That obviously, as we go forward, then into the full business case, then those costs will be refined and will be firmed up.
How can you claim that the short table circulated last night constitutes a full costing of the Shire Hall project?
It's an estimate. It's an estimate which we alluded to on Monday that we were working with, look forward to. I would also like to draw Councillor Harvey's point on Monday was that the original costings drawn up in November 22 of 7.5 million, and that we were questioning an architectural house and potential liability under their work. This work has been carried out by the same organisation, so it's makes again. But the November 22 costs of 7.5 million were broken with Councillor Davis into 3 points: red, amber, green. Red you had to do, amber nice to have, and greens were the gold-plated solution. What this costing that we've put together, 3.641, is the reds and the ambers. We've removed the green elements. But again, I would emphasise, and please emphasise very strongly, that these costs are estimates, as best we have at this minute in time.
So just to clarify, you're saying that the £7.5 million estimate that came to Cabinet in November 2022 with red, amber, blue and coded, and you stripped out which part?
The green.
You stripped out only the green parts, and the bits remaining are the red and amber, i.e. the really urgent bits.
The elements to make the building fit for purpose for the library.
Okay. So I was in Cabinet in November 2022, and so I was able to read those documents and had access to the confidential background documents. And I would like to draw your attention to the fact that those documents said that there was an alternative option to the full future investment and future-proofing the building, i.e. investing only in the bare minimum to get the building operational. And a number of disadvantages were cited for doing that, just the bare minimum, including potential for future issues and incidents, meaning additional expenditures, to be incurred further down the line. And the estimate for that bare minimum investment to get the building operational was very significantly higher than the figure that you provided us with last night.
Okay. All I can say there, Councillor, is that effectively we are you now calling into question then the professional, the proprietary of the organisation we're dealing with? We've asked them to remove what we classed as the green elements, the nice to haves, and that's the estimate, emphasised estimate figure that they have given us. It will be refined as we go forward.
So I'm questioning why in November last year the same consultant said that the bare minimum to bring the building back into operation was a figure very significantly higher than the figure that apparently the same consultants provided to the committee last night.
I'm afraid I'm unable to give you an informed decision on that, not having seen those papers you refer to, but all I can say is based on the papers we've got in front of us at the minute.
Can I call on an officer to provide assistance with this? Because it is indeed puzzling.
There's a couple of things. that's okay. So the original question was around how the gap might be funded, and not to forget that some of this is grant from Stronger Towns funding that would make up some of that gap. So at least £200,000 of any write-off of some costs today would be covered from the grant funding and the Stronger Towns Board. So they're open to looking at how the full grant can be retained to support the Shire Hall project. In terms of looking at the costs for Shire Hall, so it's the same technical consultants that looked at the original report that have gone through that report to look at how we can bring the building back into use for the library and learning centre. That stripped out some of the things that kind of be over and above enabling works to open up the building, and it doesn't include the area redeveloping the core, which isn't subject at this stage to the library and learning centre project. So that's why there's probably a variation between the figure that you're referring to, Councillor Chams, and the one that's provided today. It's also just to add, some of this information is obviously commercially in confidence as well, and is subject to future procurement. So some of the data, you've got a summary of the report that's been produced. There is further details behind that, but that's held commercially in confidence, subject to future procurement, and that's why the full report has been released.
Can I ask a colleague from Finance to assist us here, please? Online, Sarah Jarrett, perhaps.
Rachel,
sorry.
Rachel, yeah.
Sarah, I believe, knows about the building there.
She does. She's a bit.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, we can provide I suppose if what you're asking for is a reconciliation between the two figures, we can look into that and provide that after this meeting to explain any movement.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I appreciate that. Can I ask why that clarification was not provided before this meeting, Councillor Stoddart? Because we did ask for the political consultation, and we were promised the financial information necessary to understand the costings.
My recollection was you wished to see the outline costing for the work for Shire Hall as at this moment in time, which is what's been provided to you.
I think if you review the recording of that, you will see that I asked for a breakdown of costings.
Is that not what the table gives you?
No. It gives us a large figure of £3.1 something million for everything. That's not a breakdown.
So
thank you, Rachel, for offering to provide clarification on that and the difference between the screw figures that seem to be on the table at the moment, the 7.5, the 3.6, and the figure in between that was the originally the November 22 bare minimum figure. Thank you. I'd like to ask Sarah Jowett. Sarah, can you provide clarification on why the figure that was previously looked at for the bare minimum for opening the Shire Hall is significantly higher than the figure that is now being suggested?
Sorry. Yes, thank you, Chair. I think we're working to slightly different briefs, is the honest answer, and this is a desktop exercise. The original figure was based upon the red, the amber star, the amber and the green, and those were the decisions that were made by the previous administration while we had an empty building that we wanted to invest and do it all, and that included quite a significant workload. What we've been asked to do now with this administration is to look at the absolute bare minimum. So we are looking at boilers, wiring, and the heating replacement, and the and paring down so that we can look at some of the works in phases as well. So do what we can afford to do now in order to get the library and the learning centre operational. So I don't think the two briefs are comparable. So we would be leaving the CCTV room, for example, there and not demolishing it. So there were various works like PVs as well, but also we were working with the court service, who were at the time our tenant, and we were fully anticipating them to come back and be a tenant of the building. Now that they've withdrawn from the project, that also provides us with capacity to think differently about the building. But I'm sure that we can provide a form of words for you after the committee.
Thank you, Sarah. It's not so much a form of words I'm interested in as really understanding the detail of why these numbers are so different. Looking back at the November 22 report, it referred on page 35 to extensive defects throughout. including water ingress in many locations, crumbling integrated masonry, degraded lead roofs and gutters, rotten windows and doors, rising and penetrating damp at basement levels, mechanical and electrical systems substandard, possible compliance issues, and poor condition and standards generally.
Yep, and
That's
they are all still there.
Yeah, and that's why it's extremely surprising that in November 2022 it was considered to cost £7.5 million to bring the building back into use, that an absolute bare minimum figure was not all that much lower than that, and definitely higher than the figure that is being provided to us yesterday. And in the meantime, construction costs are increasing by 10%, more than 10% a year.
We've had our consultants do a desktop exercise of actually looking at the figures and bringing them up to date. So there was a heavy inflationary cost produced in the 7.5 million, which was, say, they're all cost estimates and subject to procurement. And what we've discovered on the recent exercise is that the costs have not increased significantly, as we might have expected a year or so ago when materials and inflation and supplies were exceptionally dynamic. So we're reasonably happy with the cost estimates subject to procurement. 7.5 was doing absolutely everything. So that was doing redecoration, it was restoring pictures, it was changing the carpets, it was doing everything, but in line with the court service being there. So we're on a different page now. We have no tenant going forward, and we're able to look at what are the bare minimum, which is still there. The damp is still there, the roof lights still need doing, the heating system, the electrics, there are some building compliance issues, but by not doing some works, it means that we don't have to do others. So this is based upon, say, a desktop study at this time. And now what will happen is that we'll get the project board back up and running. We'll sit down with our consultants and designers, and we'll fully scope up and brief and design what the Shire Hall needs to look like and the works that actually need to happen in order to take this forward. But we've been through a plan. We've got an indicative cost, which is all we can do at this time, the same as the cost for the Shire Hall. They're all indicative, the original costs, and we'll get a better output for the full business case, which will come back in October.
Thanks, Sarah. Councillor Todd, yeah, I was going to ask you a question, but crack on.
So, of course, those full detailed costs will be included in the full business case that will be submitted through the 12 months.
Yeah, but David, yeah. I'm going to check in with a couple more questions and then I'll certainly come to you. The financial information, the only financial information that was provided with this report provided to this committee last night after 7 PM came with a quite extraordinary rider that the figures below are for information only and are not intended to inform the decision to select a new location for the library. If those figures are not intended to be used to inform the decision, what financial information is? But the decision is to be taken tomorrow without any financial information to inform it.
The current decision this week is for the best location for the library.
But how can that decision be made without an understanding of what the cost of putting the library in the new location will be?
Sorry, Chair, the point of the exercise, it paused in Cabinet last month. The Cabinet decision tomorrow, we will be debating the issue, and it'd be really beneficial to have this discussion. It was beneficial to have the discussion on Monday with full political consultation. We've heard that. But we really need, I mean, there's been talk about the cost of getting the building ready so that we could progress with the library scheme, and we've been given an estimate here, and I think that helps us to inform a decision moving forward. And then we need the full business case so that we can be in a position to say, yes, this is definitely the way to go, and this will be the best use of the Shire Hall. With regard to the costs of all the projects, we are responsible for Maylord Orchards, we're responsible for the Shire Hall, And we have to use both buildings in the best way that we think the council can maximise these assets for the benefit of people of Herefordshire. So these are difficult, challenging questions to work through, but we have to work through them. And this is the purpose of getting to the situation where we are now. But we're not going to do that without listening to everybody's views, and that's the purpose and the benefit of coming to scrutiny and political consultation. And there will be, no doubt, a good debate tomorrow at Cabinet. So that's the virtue of having these meetings and to discuss these things here. But I go back to the fundamental point for us about whatever the costs, they have to be reasonable costs, of course, but we must get the best outcomes in terms of achieving the library for Herefordshire citizens and the best outcomes for Maitland Orchards.
Indeed, and this is my final point before I'm coming to you, David. You referred to the decision in the previous Cabinet to conduct a review, and a terms of reference was set out for that review, and two of the criteria were value for money and financial viability. However, the review itself makes no reference to either of those headings. The terms of reference for the financial viability section are set out on page 66, and there are 8 bullet points that the financial viability assessment was supposed to cover. The report, the review itself, only covers the first 2 points. It doesn't cover point 3, capital requirements to bring the site into use as a city light and learning centre, nor does it cover point 4, ongoing revenue requirements for operating the site. How can the review therefore be said to provide adequate information on which to base a decision tomorrow, given that it hasn't fulfilled its own terms of reference? And I'm looking to Councillor Bramer or the leader to answer this question.
Sorry, excuse me. So can you just remind me the point 2, sorry?
Page 66.
Yeah, I've got 66, thank you.
Okay, the terms of reference for the review that you commissioned at your last Cabinet meeting specified 8 elements of financial viability that would be assessed. The review itself only covers the first 2 points.
The review purpose.
The review, the document in front of us today and the document in front of you tomorrow that is intended to inform your decision, the document that responded to the terms of reference, but it only responds to the first 2 of the 8 terms of reference, and it doesn't contain any information on capital requirements to bring the site into use or ongoing revenue requirements for operating the site. How then can you make a decision tomorrow when you do not have that information that you said in the terms of reference you were going to consider?
Yeah, well, we will always have capital requirements to make sure that the Shire Hall is brought into use. That is something that this council is determined to deal with. The last administration had lots of other challenges that it faced, and the decision in November was to not do anything with the Shire Hall at that point in time because of all of your other pressing priorities. But this council will always have the responsibility of having to deal with the Shire Hall, and given the level of cost that is required to fix the Shire Hall and all of the outstanding issues, it was always going to be a capital issue that we would have to address. So,
excuse me, Councillor Lester, but that's just generalised information. What I'm specifically saying is your terms of reference said you would interrogate the total costs, including the capital requirements, but that has not been done. Nor have you interrogated the revenue requirements. Indeed,
I take the point that we need a full business case before we proceed with the decision to move forward with the library going into the Shire Hall.
Therefore, you're not in a position to make a decision at this point because there is no financial information on what you make a decision.
Well, we need that full business case to come back to Cabinet to make a final decision, and then if that transpires that more capital investment is required, then that will be a decision that will go to Cabinet and full council.
We have a comfort break.
I've set a long comfort break at 11:30. Have I informed you before? Pardon?
I can't wait an hour and a half, that's all.
11:30.
Oh, well, feel free to leave the room if you ever need to for comfort reasons, but yes. There'll be a break, 5 minutes at 11:30, and then an alarm is set for that. Councillor Hitchnell.
Yes, I hope hopefully this is working. First of all, just to reiterate, this debate is about cancelling the Maylor project. The decision today does not say we're going to the Shire Hall, it just says we are cancelling the Maylor Lords. So yes, it's very interesting to know all this information about Shire Hall. The most important element, this is about cancelling something, and I just want to make sure we do not forget that. Looking at the paper that was circulated last night, just for clarification really for me, please. It said in the middle, it summarises the purpose of this. It says, in summary, the consultants were asked to estimate a high level of technical costs to reflect first defects such as the risk of structural failure or water egress, B, work necessary to halt the ongoing deterioration, C, replacement of inadequate mechanical, electrical, etc. And finally, any works which did not address their resultant council not meeting the statutory obligations. So there is no reference in there whatsoever to converting the building to a library. So the figure of 3.6 is not about converting to a library, it's everything but that. So do you have any, so just so I want to make sure, being there's very suggestion that this is the cost of converting to a library, it isn't, no. So what sort of indication do you have of the likely additional costs of converting it into a library? Obviously there will be things like the performance area, there will be all sorts of other ideas you have about other alternative use. So what sort of figure are you looking at, or do you not have that figure? So that figure cannot inform this debate. Thank you.
And the actual conversion of the library, the element you're talking about, the desks, the chairs, the books, etc., that will come from the Stronger Fund, the Stronger Towns Fund of 3 million.
If the chair, if I may, the full business case and if it goes ahead in the Shire Hall, then there will be a vision put forward for how the Shire Hall is converted into a library. And the scope of that works could be covered by the Stronger Towns Fund if we achieve the same outcomes, which is our expectation to meet those and where we can surpass those and provide an enhanced offer. But the refurbishment will to facilitate the works to get the library into the Shire Hall will depend on the design, and that design will then determine how much that refit will cost. So there you're absolutely right to distinguish the two. There's a cost of turning it into a library in places. The Learning Centre, a lot of that work has already been done because we've got the undercroft that we can use and other buildings there that would be to be using them as the Learning Centre element of it. But there will be costs associated with bookshelves and facilitating the library and reception areas like that, anything to do with the library as you would envisage it in that Shire Hall space, that would have to be designed and then costed, and then there will be in a better position to say the conversion to the library will be a certain cost, and that will be subject to design work.
Thank you. So the 3 million that might be available from the Stronger Towns Fund, is the council going to put any money in towards the library element? What sort of contributions can come from the council? There is a match funding element in the Stronger Towns Fund.
So the match funding will come from the value of the Shire Hall, together with the 1.2 million left over from the original 1.8 million for the capital works.
Yes, council, what is the value of the Shire Hall?
The Shire Hall currently valued at 7.55 million. So more than matches.
We can sell it for 7.55 million.
That's the current value asset, yes.
Extraordinary.
That was not the impression given in the papers to Cabinet in November last year. When was it last valued?
I can't give you that particular information, but I had the value.
I think that it might be just worth going a couple of the points around the figure. So we would need to undertake a new Red Book valuation based on the future purpose of the use of Shire Hall, including the library as part of the full business case, but obviously it does include a residual value as a property now, and that's what the contribution from the Maylords project was. The Maylords contribution was based on the asset value of Maylord Orchards. It's 140,000 square feet in the middle of the town centre. Obviously, Shire Hall's got a significant footprint, and we will need to undertake a valuation based on its future use, and that will be then part of the Stronger Towns business case for funding. There's also then the contribution that we would need to make as a council to the works we've just been talking about to open up the building, which would again make part of the match funding contribution should Stronger Towns decide to have a look at or could decide to kind of fund the project. The Stronger Towns board, when we met them last week, did indicate that they would be willing to look at the full amount of grant continuing to be made available to this project, subject to being able to deliver the outcomes that we think that we can, and that's why it's not kind of easy to say at this stage what the additional capital requirement would be from the council to contribute to the project. Going back to the last question, because we need to work through the business case, understand how much it costs, understand how much of the grant could contribute to the library works, but also the wider works to make the building accessible for the library. So the Maylords project includes a contribution to the atrium, to Trinity Square, to works to Maylord Orchards to make Maylord Orchards a library. It's not just the library, so the grant that we can get from Stronger Towns potentially will contribute towards some of those wider costs. So all of that will be set out in the full business case, including an up-to-date Red Book valuation, should we get to that stage if Cabinet decides to proceed tomorrow.
Thank you. As you look through the meeting division, obviously we've got two columns. On one side we've got Maylords, on the other side we've got Shire Hall. I was struck by the fact, which is probably a question for Councillor Lester, that as you read through the column on the left-hand side, all of the information has been well researched. We have reports, we have all the proper figures for the Maylords as a project, and I think as Councillor Chan said, that was ready to go. We could have pushed the button on that tomorrow. It does feel to me that the Shire Hall, we don't have all the information yet. We don't have all the figures. We don't have a proper business plan. Surely, Councillor Lester, in an ideal world, you would want to be making this decision where you had the information evenly balanced on both sides. At the moment, it feels like there's a bit of false equivalence here. You can't compare the one with the other properly because we don't have all of that information. Surely the pragmatic thing for the council to do would be to wait before making the decision to trash the Maylords decision until you have all of the information at your fingertips and can make a proper balanced judgment on the best place for the library to go to moving forward.
Chair. Yes, please go ahead. Yes.
Waiting for the chair.
Sorry.
To give me permission. Wouldn't speak without your permission.
You have permission to answer a direct question.
Right, yes. In an ideal world, that's a really good starting point to make the situation. The situation we found ourselves in was that when we formed the administration, the works to progress the library in Maylord were just about to start. And as all new administrations, you come in and think, hang on a second, is that the right decision to make? So the challenge for us was having to pause something that was just about to start. And in an ideal world, you'd be in a situation where there was no time pressure and you could compare the two in a way that we wanted with a full business case. But we weren't in that situation because the works were about to start with Maylord. So we made a decision to pause, not having the full business case and not having the full situation with regard to the Shire Hall. And in an ideal world, you'd have both to compare. But the challenge we have for ourselves is the fundamental question about what's in the long-term best interests of the library. And when you've got such a special building like the Shire Hall that we've used for years and years and years for the public, for civic events, for civic purposes, it made perfect sense to say, hang on, we must pause and review the situation, because if we can get the library into the Shire Hall to achieve all of those objectives so that it is a learning centre and a library for the residents of Herefordshire, that is a really important thing to achieve if it can be done. So that's where we're at this current moment in time, because the overriding theme here is where is the best place for the library. And to me, Shire Hall is such an important strategic building for Herefordshire, and when you think of the scope of the building and the potential that's there, it's so important that we use every avenue in our means to make sure that we explore fully the benefits of putting that facility in such an iconic building. that's the reason why we are where we are at the moment. In an ideal world, you're absolutely right. You could have compared the two in isolation without a time scale, but we weren't there with that. But that's why we think, because of the benefits that are clear about being able to utilise such an iconic building for a library and learning centre, that's why we are wanting to progress this to the state where we can see the full business case and then make that decision based on that.
Councillor Hitchner and then Councillor Cornbury.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I think that's an interesting analysis. I recall 4 years ago when the previous administration came into place, we had a very difficult decision to make about the accommodation station approach, whether to go ahead with that or not. And we decided to go ahead. We could have looked at alternative sites, and I'm very pleased that we did go ahead, because had we not done so, I don't think that building would exist. With COVID and all sorts of uncertainties, different events which were outside our control. So I do hope that when you make the decision about this, similar circumstances don't occur, which result in not being able to deliver a library. Which kind of comes me to the point which I like to make and ask: have you considered continuing, or at least putting the Maylord decision on hold, so not cancelling it, but putting it on hold, to wait until such time as you have worked up the business decision for the Shire Hall? I think that's a much more appropriate approach. When I look forward, I think we have a full council meeting potentially in October or November, and we will be faced with a decision which will be either to go to the Shire Hall and spend money on that, or nothing. I think a much better approach would be to present full council, with a choice of either the Shire Hall or continue with Maylords. And there, in both those cases, there will be a library. In the alternative case of it just being the Shire Hall or nothing, there's potential for having no library. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, John. Yes, I mean, that issue came up at the political consultation, and I think it was Councillor Harvey's point, I think it was. I think that's a really valid point to make, and thank you for restating that point, Councillor Hitchner. And I think that will be a really important thing for the Cabinet to reflect on in their debate tomorrow.
So can I ask that's a recommendation from this committee, if that's possible? Thank you.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, to clarify, I think that would entail that we would recommend as a committee that the Cabinet's recommendations A and D are removed, and that the Cabinet report goes forward just with recommendations B, that a full business case for the Shire Hall development is progressed. Because that would enable the consideration of like for like comparison, and it would address the many concerns that I've raised and others around the costing and the lack of detail and evidence on which to make the decision.
Can I just interject with that? I can understand a pause, and that one will need costing, no doubt. There might be a consequence of delaying work on the Maylord. So instead of placing all these contracts now, they're placed in 2 or 3 months' time. That might have an additional cost, and I'd like to think that might be evaluated in the report. Thank you. So I'm not saying carry on with Maylords, place the contracts and all that. I'm saying you should evaluate whether you pause, what would the cost of that be? So the Cabinet can make it, or full council can make a decision later on in the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hitchner. Councillor Cornbury.
Thank you, Chair. So my question then would be, if we were to decide on Maylord Orchards as the site for the library, how permanent would you think that decision would last?
If we were to
decide on Maylord Orchards as a site for the new library, how permanent would that ever be? Because obviously, if we were going to change, we were going to take it as a library, could you see it as a library lasting in Maylord Orchards?
I personally couldn't see it lasting in a library in Maylord Orchards for a very long time. Clearly the DWP have got a 5-year lease on where the library was going to go, and so the library would have to go to be implemented there would have to go upstairs onto the secondary retail space, if you like. And I think that what I'm looking to do is to find something for another 250 years for the Shire Hall, not for 5 years, that may have been the case at Maylord. So I don't know if it answers your question, but I think that with the DWP and other people interested in retail and commercial space at Shire Maylords, it's unlikely that the library will have a very long duration at that location.
Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you very much. We've made a lot about the costs of cancelling the Maylords project, and of course, cancelling capital projects is not new. Did it, or rather, the previous administration did it 4 years ago and cancelled the bypass. And I just wondered how robust the scrutiny of that decision was, whether it's as robust as we are this morning. And the costs involved with that particular matter far exceeded what we're talking about today. But if we put Maylord on hold, there will be an additional cost, and I just wondered how much that would be, because we would then be holding the contractors on board, if you like, but with no work being done. So I just wondered, if we do that, if we make that recommendation, what's it going to cost us in addition to the costs already incurred?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, you're quite right. At the minute, as you know, the cost, and the Chair alluded to, from the contractor is potentially up to £608,000, in addition to the 684 and the 86. We're engaging with our contractors to try and get a decision from them and how much that will be, and what the appropriate time would be that we need to make a decision on that.
If I can, it clearly, the cost of what has been suggested by Councillor Hitchener, waiting until we have a full business case comparative information for both, will clearly be less than the cost of, clearly won't be any more than the cost of cancelling at this point, and there will be much stronger evidence base to do that. On your previous point about scrutiny, indeed, previous decisions have gone through the same level of scrutiny, and in fact, the decision that you referred to on the bypass was done on the basis of, I think, a 450-page set of documents that had an extraordinary amount of detail, including financial details. So I think it would be widely acknowledged that the evidence base was significantly stronger than the one before us today.
And Chair, took an awful lot longer than a few weeks.
Indeed, it did. Much, much, much more thorough process.
Can I come back again to my fellow councillor? I'd also make the point that at the minute we haven't got a signed contract with the contractor. It is on a letter of intent that we have with them.
Can I just add? There's a challenging and interesting dynamic with Maylord, because you obviously want the best commercial outcome for it. And the fact that the last administration purchased the lease on Maylord, it enabled the council to have full control over the building, and I acknowledge that. And I think that was really advantageous for the council to be in that position, because it allows the council to consider the full destiny of Maylord Orchards and how people can use that and come to rent space there, have leases there, and add to the economy of Herefordshire and Hereford City. To answer Councillor Cornthwaite's point, my concern about the library, one of the issues we have to take on board, and one of the concerns that I have about the library being in Maylord Orchards, and it's something that everyone's will have to bear in mind, I think, is that the original location for the library was envisaged to be downstairs, but because there's the need, and a pressing need to make sure that the Maylord Orchards is used to best commercial purposes, as well as the benefits of the leaseholders and tenants being there, is that you have to get the best economic fit for Maylords, which is why the job centre took on the lease there, and it's now a facility for Herefordshire residents to use. But because the whole building is a commercial centre, you will always have the pressure to make sure that that building is being used for the best commercial purposes it can. If you have a library in the centre of that, it does put the council into a situation where it won't necessarily have the flexibility to do the best commercial outcome for what is key retail and commercial real estate in the centre of Hereford. So there is, I'm not saying for 1 second that, oh, you put the library in there and it'll only be there for 2 years because some better person will come along, so you move the library. But making sure that mail-ords would be solely for retail or commercial purposes gives the council that flexibility that it would not have if you've got a library in part of that building.
Councillor Driscoll.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Stott, just picking up on what you said then, at the present time we only currently have a letter of intent with the contractor. Would you agree with me that that potentially then lessens the need to cancel mail-ords immediately, and it does strengthen the case, putting it on hold until we have the proper business case for Shire Hall, so we compare, at that stage we can compare like for like?
The issue is that the longer we delay, then potentially the more those, that 608k may solidify from a potential cost to a real cost. What I would also bring up is that the additional contractor costs will be subject to review to ensure that the legal obligation to pay exists, that's point, and the decapitalisation of capital expenditures governed by the capital policy and the capital standards. So whatever is required, we will pay, but it will be right, it'll be of the appropriate value, not what they believe.
But it's only a letter of intent, as you said at this stage, which obviously makes life somewhat easier for the council to wait a little bit longer.
But we obviously have a good commercial relationship with this contractor, and we would like to ensure that it's there. So as soon as we have, we prefer to be completely honest with them up front as quick as we can.
Yeah, but if I was a contractor and and there was a chance that I might still get the work, and I'm just prepared to wait for a couple of months, and it's only a letter of intent, I'd say, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll wait a couple of months, rather than not having the gig at all.
Could I, Chair, would you mind? I'm borrowing my spell.
Yeah.
If I could just maybe ask some ops support on that, because I think whatever you're right, because tenders only have a certain lifetime. I'm not sure what the life of even that letter of intent is. So we just get clarity on that. That'd be useful.
So the letter of intent would enter into on the basis that it was holding the cost of fixed price cost of the tender at the time, which is now a number of weeks ago, and allowed some preparatory work to happen while the final wording of the contract was finalised. But it's very unlikely now the contractor would stick to that same price. As we mentioned, construction cost inflation means that obviously a tender is based on the costs at that point in time, so the cost of materials. I think there's a difference between keeping the project open as an option for mail order auctions, where we would probably now need to re-tender for those costs should it go forward anyways, and keeping the current contractor and its supply chain unfairly on tender hooks. So if a supply chain, so just to go into a bit more detail, so the supply chain would require us to hold the capacity of their workforce ready at a moment's notice to be able to carry on with the project, and also order space for materials could be cancelled now rather than being delivered at a later point in time. So there is a difference between a decision to keep the project in the capital programme as an option, as has been suggested, for which we can re-procure at the point at which that project should go ahead, and a difference between managing now fairly the contracts that we've currently got in place or the relationship we've got with some of those contractors.
Thank you. We're just about to go for a break, but to sum up then, I think what we've identified so far this morning is that there is very significant uncertainty regarding the costs of proceeding with the proposed Shire Hall project, and that it is felt by members of the committee that it would be extremely beneficial to ensure that those costs at full business case stage, so that a comparison between the cost of the mail-order option and the cost of the Shire Hall option could be made on a like-for-like basis. It's acknowledged that there is, if Maylord is then, you know, the better option, it would probably be at a higher cost than it was previously. It is a consequence of the decision taken 1 month ago, which is the point that I made at that time, that you were incurring the £1.3 million of risk with the decision 1 month ago, rather than, you know, here. But the benefits could be significant, because if it turns out that the costs of relocating to Shire Hall are prohibitive, then that is important information that will need to be known, and the risk otherwise is that, as Councillor Hickman has highlighted, we may end up with no votes in the hand rather than 3 or 1. So I think we've got clarity on a recommendation relating to that from here. We'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll return to consider risks and further questions. Thank you all. On the review of the new library and learning use of central location. Right, in the earlier session we covered costs to final extent. I know that there are a number of issues relating to risks that colleagues would like to ask questions on. Can I invite colleagues to indicate if they have questions? Councillor Hickman.
I do, I'd be interested to hear from Cabinet what they see as the most significant risks attached with the proposal to cancel the Maylord project. I can give what I think is the answer, but I'd be interested to know what they think. I think the biggest risk is that once a business case is produced, it is not viable, or maybe some permission is not available. So for some reason, the library cannot go ahead. And I think that's, by my mind, is the big risk. Cancel the Maylord's project at Shire Hall. You can't go case on the Shire Hall. Now, I look at the paper, and I look at the risk section, and I don't see that risk mentioned. I think it is such a significant first. If I read the column on the left-hand side, I'll take the first one and the third one. So it says the risk is, we are confident the library refurbishment will be delivered within the financial envelope. I'm sorry, but that's not a statement of risk. That is confusing risk and mitigation. The third one that talks about any installation of library and learning centre for the Shire Hall will be subject to refurbishment and renovation of the wider Shire Hall building. Again, that's not a statement of risk. And I would ask that the wording of the risk section on the left-hand column, they are risks stated, and quite clearly on the right-hand side, it's the mitigation. I'd be interested to hear from the Cabinet what they perceive as the most significant risk, and whether they feel it's properly articulated in the paper. Thank you.
I think, rather than answer the direct question, I think I would put in here that there appears to be some corners at some meetings and by some communications that have come my way to be a feeling that perhaps the way that this has gone forward and that Maylord's is currently paused is a cunning device by the Conservative administration to try to avoid building a library. Now, I must make it absolutely crystal clear that my ambition is to build a world-class library, not to find a cunning way to avoid building one at all. And I do resent those persons who have made the point that it's just one of those cunning Tory plans. Personally, I'm not involved in cunning Tory plans. I'm involved in building a library for this county that we can be proud of. And with regard to the risk register, there are others, I'm sure, who alter the words so that you're happy with that, but I want to make it crystal clear that not only I, but I believe the whole Cabinet want to build a library. Shire Hall, to me, seems the place to be. Maylord's may not be the right place for it. We will decide when we've got the business case, when we've got some costing figures to know, but it isn't that because we're suggesting Council 1, we're trying to not build a library at all. And it's absolutely not the case. And I would like to go on record as having said that. Thank you.
Oliver, I appreciate you didn't answer my question, Councillor Brennan. Could you please answer it? What do you think is the most significant risk? It's very important the risks are evaluated. We're talking about huge sums of money. We're talking about a new library or not.
Is that question to Councillor Raymer or to me? Or
Councillor Raymer, very clearly quite.
You're suggesting what is the biggest risk that we have?
Yes, please.
The biggest risk that we have is that there are lots of risks that we have, but what we want to achieve is a world-class library. And the risk of not doing that is by not going forward with significant plans. But we have got to take a business case forward rather than a dream forward.
Councillor Bramer, with respect to not answering the question from Councillor Hitchener is which of the risks of the option that you have outlined in this report do you think are most significant?
Would you take on?
Councillor Bramer, why are you not able to answer the question?
I've asked a colleague to do so for me, thank you.
But so, I would say there's a specific way I'd like to answer the question in terms of risk. I think the biggest risk, of course, is that we've chosen the wrong place for the library and the learning centre, and we want the best place for that. And fundamental to all of these debates is, are we making the best choice for where we want the library and the learning centre? And the biggest risk of all is to get the wrong place, right? But we're working our way through that. But in terms of risks to the project, is, you know, it's all to do with funding. Everybody knows it's all to do with funding. So one of the biggest risks would be that the project to have the Shire Hall didn't meet the expectations of the Stronger Towns Board, and they thought that they weren't able to transfer the project from one location to the other. The mitigation for that is what we want to do is, based on the reasons for having a learning centre and a library to go to the Stronger Towns Fund, is that, you know, there's an offer there to provide a great library, to provide a learning centre, and we think that because we can match that expectation, if not better, that mitigates the risk, because what we really want is, as Councillor Bramer has said, very high level ambition for what the library and learning centre should be, and that we think, if it's, you know, we put it subject to the business case, once we put that forward, you know, we think that would be a very attractive offer for the Stronger Towns Board to consider, and then consider funding it.
Thank you, Councillor Lecter. So I heard you say clearly that the biggest risk of all is to get the wrong place, the wrong location. And I think that reflects the anxieties that the committee has been discussing with you earlier. There is insufficient information on which to base a decision about which is the right location at this stage. You also spoke about the risks relating to the funding, and I certainly have some questions relating to that, which I'd like to come on to. But first of all, yes, Councillor Proctor.
I'd just like to explore this may not even be a risk, but I'm going to tilt it into the risk section. So, based on this report, the library will continue at Christ Street for nearly 2 years, so an extra 9 months. And obviously there would be a risk that projects sometimes get delayed, so there would be a risk that they will continue. So, and by your own assessment, Christ Street is not a suitable place to run a library because it would otherwise have been factored into the review of locations. So is there any mitigation that we can, is that an acceptable length of time? Nearly two years, perhaps longer, for people to use Friar Street as a library? And is there any mitigation that we can provide within that time period?
Mitigation.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So in terms of the Friar Street, the temporary location, obviously we've got that in the city, but we've also been liaising with our library in Belmont in terms of looking to extend opening hours, which they've agreed to 1 additional day at the moment. We've also got the bus as well, the library bus that we will be looking to go out into the community with regard to that. And obviously we still have our e-books and delivery of books as well in terms of that. Obviously what we will do is all to continue and engage with our customers who are to see if ensuring that we are continuing to offer that. We have also been in contact with DULUP in terms of our library offer, in terms of our statutory responsibilities. They're comfortable with it at the moment. Obviously they can see the wider opportunities that we've got coming around the corner, and obviously we'll ensure that we continually engage with them to ensure that we're meeting our statutory responsibilities as well.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Thank you very much. It's clear from what I've heard this morning that the opposition parties are against the Shire Hall. It's pretty clear. But the risks, we talked about risks, are well covered in the report from both sides, and the pros and the cons for both of them. But reading this report as a bit of a lay person, I'm not a financial person at all, but reading this report, 18 pages as I remember, it's fairly clear that the Shire Hall is the best option. When you read into the report, the pros and cons for both sides. There's going to be financial costs. There always is. But if we as the council decide that this is the way we're going to go, then we've got to go. And then we will, I'm sure there's other ways of finding money for these projects. But I think we've got to be realistic and say that this is a terrific project. And if it did work, if it came about that the Shire Hall became our library, learning and resource centre and everything else, it would, as Harry said, it would be world class, as opposed to stuffing it in a shopping mall.
Councillor Baker, that's a statement of belief rather than a scrutiny question.
I'm allowed to say it. Am I not?
I'm encouraging you to play a scrutiny role in this room, because your role here is as a scrutiny committee member rather than as a defender of an administration's particular policy.
I'd just like to come back as one of the members of the opposition, as you called us. I'm definitely not against doing something to the Shire Hall. I've spent the last 4 years in Ross trying to bring one of our cultural assets, the Market House, back to life, and to make sure it's properly maintained. I just want to make sure that we spend the council's money as properly, and we make the right decision. That's the only reason I'm here. At what price? Is 10 million enough? Is 20 million enough? Should it be 30 million? Maybe. Of course not. We just need to make the right decision on behalf of the people of Herefordshire. And I would love to see the Shire Hall brought back into use in some capacity. I'm definitely not against that idea.
Not as a library.
No, if it turns out, if we're given a balanced and proper document to consider, whereby we can see the case for the two potential sites, and we can make an informed decision. I just honestly don't feel I'm in a position to make an informed decision at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Bristol, and that is also my position. I am not objecting in principle to anything. I want to know that decisions are fully supported by clear evidence. And on that subject, relating to page 37 of the report and the section on risks, the first item in the table is actually not a risk, it is a statement of belief. We're confident that the library refurbishment will be delivered within the financial envelope. Councillor Bramer, can you clarify, A, what is the financial envelope, and B, what gives you confidence?
Financial envelope for this is generally found in the business case, and any other information that I have got, I'm unable to give you at this moment because of commercial confidentiality.
Well, you ought to have at your fingertips an understanding of the figures that we're currently working with. For example, the 3 million grant from the Stronger Towns Fund, of which £684,000 has already been spent.
I'm aware of this Stronger Towns grant. I'm aware of how much money the current get the Shire Hall building back into operation. I'm not quite sure what the question is.
The question is, what is the financial envelope, and what gives you confidence that the library refurbishment will be delivered within it?
I think just we're talking about the Stronger Towns Fund.
Is it possible to
So roughly £2.3 million now.
I think just to clarify, sorry, so the wording of that risk could be clearer. Apologies, it's not, but the intent was can the library and learning resource centre be delivered within the scope of the Stronger Towns grant, and we believe it can. So the library and learning resource element can be delivered within the grant.
Okay, and that grant will be reduced if the decision is taken to move from Maylords to the Shire Hall. The amount remaining in that pot would be £2.3 million roughly.
So
less than it was previously.
So it's one of the things we need to work through with the board and the Strong Towns board and the core business case. But currently we've got a budget of £3.5 million for the Maylords project, of which the amount as you mentioned earlier that we spent so far is about £700,000. But the £200,000, at least £200,000 of that money is kind of contribution from government for the development of business cases and can be written off. So one of the things we'll need to clarify in working through the full business case with the Stronger Towns board is how much money might remain available for the project within that financial envelope. But we believe that the library element and the learning resource element, which don't require significant structural works to Shire Hall, can be delivered within that grant funding.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddart.
Chair, if I can just come up and address the financial envelope that you mentioned. So the financial envelope was built up of three elements. As you quite already said, there's a £3 million from the Strong Towns Fund. We've also then got the existing £1.2 million left from the original £1.8 million in the capital programme. That leaves a delta of £2.4 million, which will come from planned future capital programmes.
Assuming that the costs are roughly 3.6 million for bringing the building back into use, which we don't have clarity on that yet. Member, can you clarify which of you is the council's representative on the Stronger Hereford board now?
Lovely to meet you.
Councillor Biggs, what assurance do we have that Stronger Towns funding will be transferable to the Shire Hall location?
We've had a strong indication from the Stronger Towns board. As long as the outcomes are met, the funds will be transferred.
That is not in the gift of the Stronger Towns board, is it? It's the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities that makes the decision because the project adjustment request would have to be submitted.
Yes, so I'll clarify, the Stronger Towns board would have indicated they'd be supportive of submitting that to. Yeah,
and how long is that process likely to take for an adjustment request?
The hope is it will be expedited. I don't have detail in terms of how long that will take.
You've no idea.
I might be able to help with that. That's okay. So the current turnaround target from government's 1 month for project adjustment requests, and there has been some discussions. So DLUC, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, are part of the Stronger Towns board, and they have indicated that they would obviously look to the Stronger Towns board in terms of their judgment to support that review, and that they would be minded to support what the Stronger Towns board locally wanted to deliver, as long as it was within the realms of the original town investment plan.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddart.
The actual outputs of the business case that we are required to get the Strong Towns funding through DLUC is in your original Green Book business case, as written, 77 pages written in number 22. That has 5 outputs. That is all that we require to justify for the Strong Towns funding. And if you notice in the paper we put forward, those 5 outputs are actually stronger and enhanced rather than decreased. And we also had 2 weeks ago from the Minister for Levelling Up a letter to the CE and Council explaining that they are very forward-leaning as councils look to reallocate and change priorities.
Thank you. So you're confident?
Yes.
That an adjustment would be agreed?
Very.
If government doesn't permit the transfer of funding, what would the plan B be?
If they don't, then I would look then that one of the 3 pillars I've just outlined, that's the 3 million lost, then that would then, as part of the business case, would have to then increase the 2.6, sorry, on page, the 2.4, which would be the delta, would then become 5.4, which would then have to then be part of the business case and go forward. But as I say, I'm very confident that that will not be the case.
And to clarify, it wouldn't be transferring 3 million to the Shire Hall, it would be transferring about 2.3 maximum, because of the money's already spent and written off for Lords.
From the Stronger Towns Fund?
Stronger Towns Fund. Yeah, it'll be significantly reduced. When does Stronger Towns Fund money have to be spent by?
It's spring of 25, the commitment has to be made for those things.
So less than 2 years from now, significantly less than 2 years from now. So this brings us on to timelines and deliverability. Unless, sorry, am I missing questions from anybody? Councillor
I might be, sorry, Chair, I might be going back just slightly because I just wanted to ask something about the current position of the library. When it was mentioned about we're going to extend opening hours, so if I could just clarify that particular thing, because one of the things I've already been asked about by members of the public is why isn't the library open for the people who work for a working day? They're finding that they can't get books out in the evening. Now, I don't use the library myself, so I don't know whether that's a fact, but I believe the people that have asked me the question know that it's a fact. And if we're going to be at Friars Street for another 2 years, can we make it very accessible to the general public?
So you're right, the current library open hours aren't until the evening, currently, as we stand, due to staffing and budgets. So we have it's sort of open on a Tuesday through to Saturday morning. Obviously, we've got a number of libraries around the county as well, across, so we've got 11 libraries in total. Obviously, what we can look to consider is for whether Friar Street does need to be open in the evening, but again, obviously, we need to consider that against staffing resource as well that's available, and we'll have to balance that. So yeah, and obviously in addition to that, people are able to access the books online, and we can do the home delivery service. I mean, obviously what we can look to do is look to increase the publication of that, and also, like I said before, we will be looking to have the library van out in the community as well.
Might also just be worth clarifying, it comes back to the risk that you've got to raise, Doctor, about the library move. So the reason now the library's moved is not really to do with the Mail Halls project at this stage. It's because of the £18 million museum and art gallery, and obviously we don't want to jeopardise that project by not moving the library out. And obviously we've secured the remaining element of funding this week. National Heritage Lottery announcing the £5 million worth of funding for that. So the reason that the library has moved out now is not because of the Mail Halls project, it's so that we can facilitate that really great project for the city.
Thank you. I think this is a good moment to pay tribute to all of the officers who've been involved in the work to raise the funds for the museum project. Really good news about Heritage Lottery Fund funding that came through earlier this week, and also to pay tribute to colleagues in the previous administration who played such an important role in spearheading that project. Oh, sorry, David.
Yeah, this is one for either Councillor Biggs or Councillor Brainerd. So I've explored the possibility of having a dual track, continuing with the Mail Halls for the time being, as well as the Shire Hall. I think one of the merits of that approach might be that when you approach the Stronger Towns Fund, you're not going there as a fait accompli saying we have cancelled the Mail Halls project. Please consider this one, where they really have a bit of a gun put to their heads, as far as I can see it. Whereas if you have a joint thing, you can actually be going to them in a much more polite manner, as far as I can see it. I don't know whether you have any thoughts and comments on that.
I think we've heard it loud and clear from this group and a political consultation, so that'll be raised at Cabinet tomorrow. Councillor, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. So moving on to timelines and deliverability. Paragraph 15 of the report on page 32 says, on the indicative timelines, completion is estimated autumn 2025 for the proposed Shire Hall Library. Although the review itself, paragraph 20 on page 47, indicates completion on July 2025. Is it July or autumn? That's the Grayman.
Is it July or autumn? I'm afraid I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't really tell you exactly when it's going to be.
Well, you do have a report that gives two different completion dates. Can you
In
clarify
fact, why
why?
you're asking the question, because there are two different things in the report.
Yeah.
Okay.
The projected timelines are obviously based at this stage on the desktop review, and are obviously subject to us working with contractors and others, and once we know the survey works and other things from developing the full business case. The anticipated timeline is that we would be finished in July 2025, subject to decisions being made now. That is slightly beyond the timeframe for the Stronger Towns funding to be used. But as you know from the museum project, we can spend the Stronger Towns money first, and any match funding that comes from the council to finish the project afterwards. So that the museum project wouldn't be completed by March 2025, but we have agreement that we can spend the Stronger Towns match funding grant contribution for that.
But it also says in the report that the works for the building have to be done first before the library works can be commenced. So the spending on the library would come after the spending on fixing the building. Does that not pose a significant risk for the Stronger Towns timeframe?
And that's one of the things we need to work with. And I think there's two elements to that. So one of the things the full business case we need to work through with the technical experts is the phasing of what works would be required in order to open up the building, and when they could be implemented. But the Stronger Towns funding may well contribute towards the total project cost. So it's not necessarily that the grant funding would only have to be spent on the library itself. Usually when you apply for a project, there's a total cocktail of funding, a total agreed set of costs, and that the contribution is towards that total set of costs. And that's one of the things that we would need to work through. A bit like, for example, the Maylords project is currently based on Stronger Towns contribution going towards the atrium and Trinity Square and enabling works for the Maylords units.
Councillor Bramer, I refer you to page 74 of the report, where there is a Gantt chart setting out the anticipated timeline for the Shire Hall project.
Thank you. Carry on.
There are some somewhat heroic assumptions underlying this very thin Gantt chart in comparison with the one for the Maylords project, which is on the following page. This proposes that the project can get to Riga stage 3 within 14 weeks, that planning could be completed in 26 weeks, and procurement basically by the same point, so that in May next year, construction could start and will be completed in essentially a year. On what basis do you feel that those are realistic timeframes?
On what basis do I feel that these are realistic timeframes? Well, these are the timeframes that they usually take to happen. I'm sorry, are you trying to trick me up into saying something that you want me to say? So could you say what it is and I'll confirm or deny it?
Okay, I'll make it very clear. So the proposal to build a library in Maylords took pretty much 3 years to go from idea to the point of being ready to put the shovels in the ground now. But the proposal to put it into the Shire Hall anticipates taking essentially only about 6 months to do the same thing, despite the fact that that is a building in very poor state of repair with listed building status. Is it therefore realistic that this indicative timeframe really can give you any confidence, and does it support the confidence that is outlined in the report that everything's fine and it can be completed within the Stronger Towns Fund time envelope?
Well, I personally believe it to be the case, but it was amplified by the technical people at Mates, and they suggested this was the right time frame for it. I can only go on my own thoughts and the advice from the tech advisors, which have come up with these times. Maybe the other one for Maylords was delayed for some reason, I don't know. I wasn't here, obviously, until May 4th this year.
I think it will strike many people as a heroic assumption that the timeframe outlined on page 74 could in fact be met, given what we know about construction projects almost always overrunning, and the existing timeframes for not just the library project, but also the museum project and many other capital projects. It therefore poses quite a significant financial risk. Councillor Stoddart, would you agree, given the hard deadline for spending Stronger Towns money?
I've got a bit of experience of doing projects, including buildings work. They are challenging timelines that put there. However, the work has been done by Mace
So they are the people who are the in-house experts that we use our PMO for. I would also follow up the design of the actual library shell and core is minimal, and that the building work for all the lesser specialist items has actually already been done. So it's just more of a review. You're quite right, to bring up that as a point, but it's not a design. It's not a ground-based up design. Reval 1, as you know, Reval 1 to report for the design can be done in a very, very quick period of time because there's no actual physical place. It's all design work and put the costings, etc. So as I say,
my point is that it's taken, years to get to Reba 3 with Maylords, and it generally takes years for capital projects, so that it's a very kind of...
As I said, the core project manager would say that to get to Reba 4, it can be done in those lines. It is a challenge, and it will require commitment, but it can be done. But remember that the piece of work is not a ground-up design, it's taking existing work and refining.
You mean the piece of work on the repair of the building?
Yes.
But entirely new design work is required for installation of the library in that building.
But I'd also drawn back to the financial side. The money from the Stronger Towns Fund for Maylord has less of it available for the fit out because of the amount of work that's needed from the Stronger Towns Fund to do the work, the physical building work, correspondingly against the Shire Hall. Whilst, as you quite rightly pointed out earlier, there's less funds to go across, but more of that fund will be used for the fit out of the libraries to give us an even better capability for our residents when they go into the library itself.
How can you know that if the financial workings out has not yet been done?
Well, we've got I've got the figures.
No, the document you provided does not specify that at all. It doesn't specify anything about how the costs will be divided between sorting out the building and fitting out the library. And in fact, I think you yourself said that all of the money from Stronger Towns Fund would be spent on doing the library, not the building. And you appear to be saying something different now.
I've been corrected that a small amount of funds may be required from the 3 million, but certainly there'll be a lot more than the 3 million that will go across, of the 2.3, as you say, that was corrected, that will go across to be used for the library fit out rather than it would be in Maylords.
So this is another point that we really need to keep the detail in the full business case in order to understand, and arguably we cannot really make an informed decision until that is done.
Just clarifying some of the related costs, because, for example, in the Maylords project, we had to kind of punch through a concrete mezzanine floor in order to put a new lift in. There's new staircases. There's taking out of the escalators. So there's quite big physical structural works to Maylords, which aren't quite as comparable as doing that kind of work in the Shire Hall. So that's the reason.
And this is precisely the information that I was requesting in my question to you, Jonathan, at the political group consultation on Monday. Can we understand what the breakdown of the costs is?
It's also worth probably saying that some of the works that was commenced by the previous administration on the Shire Hall got to Reba stage 3 already on some of the wider work. So this is then the design and fit out works specific to the library. So we're not completely starting from scratch as we were the Maylords on those designs.
Thank you. So just continuing on the question of the timeline, because it is a matter of concern as to whether the Stronger Towns money, if the project adjustment request was agreed, if it could be spent in time. Quick point of clarification, so page 48 of the review on deliverability contains this text: why the works will be required for the Shire Hall before the library will be installed to address the structural defects within the building. Work carried out in preparation of this review demonstrates that these wider works would not be a barrier to the installation of the library. Those two sentences seem to be mutually incompatible. Can you clarify, does the structural work all need to be done before the library can be installed?
If the question is, does all of the remedial work need to be done before the library can be installed, the answer is no. If you're suggesting maybe is it half of it, a third of it, a quarter of it, I'm unable to give you that. But there's certainly it isn't that the last the last coat of polish goes on the last door handle before the library is installed. The remedial works that are significant are relatively small at the Shire Hall.
I refer you to my previous question and the text in your own report.
Yeah, please.
They're not small. I read out a list earlier of the remedial works that are required to the Shire Hall.
Yes.
They're really substantial.
Read them again.
What page are we?
I don't know where we are.
In fact, this is the list, this is the list on page 35 of the report to Cabinet in November last year. Water ingress in many locations, crumbling and degraded masonry, degraded lead roofs and gutters, rotten windows and doors, rising and penetrating damp, mechanical and electrical systems substandard or near end of life, possible compliance issues, fire safety, accessibility, public health, poor condition and standards generally, and heating.
Some of those apply in some places, but it isn't that the whole of the roof needs to be repaired. It isn't that the whole of the ground floor has got rising damp. Some rising damp in some places. Some roof tiles need to be put back in place. Other parts of the ceilings need to be rendered. I mean, there's not a great building project. It may be a time-consuming project, but it's not a great building project, and certainly not all of it needs to be done before the library can be commenced and then working by the time the rest of it is done.
So my question is about the details. You said it may be a time-consuming project, and arguably it is a large project because it's certainly a multi-million-pound project. My question relates to the concern as to whether it is feasible to continue to use the Stronger Towns funding, the remaining £2.3 million, to install a library within the allowable timescales, i.e. before the end of March 2025, given that major structural works would have to be done to the building. We're not talking about polishing doorknobs here, we're talking about very significant structural works and the extent to which those need to be done before the library can be installed. Would it not be useful, indeed necessary, to have clarity on which works need to be done in order to inform a more developed Gantt chart that will give confidence as to whether the works can be completed within the funding timeframe?
Thank you, Chair. What we can say is that MEDS have indicated that they are capable of the works being achieved within the timeline set out as the professional engineering body, and that they will fully explore further than the full business case. So by October, it will be fully there.
To my mind, this at all seems extremely weak and not based on evidence, unfortunately, and therefore concerning.
Can I come back to you there?
Yeah.
I would say that MACE is the professional engineering organisation, which Councillor Harvey alluded to on Monday. We're taking their advice. They're a highly professional, highly qualified team of civil and building engineers. I think we have to work that if they're saying they can do it, we believe we'd have to err on their court and start their guidance. I agree with it.
So you're saying that you believe their assurances, and I'm saying I think it would be useful to have more evidence and more of a breakdown and more clarity of detail.
Which we say will be in the full business case.
And less internal contradiction within the report in order to have that certainty. I'm arguing that it could be financially risky to rely on that assurance when, as we've just been discussing, some very heroic assumptions appear to underpin it.
I would tend to say challenging assumptions. I think they're challenging, but they're being managed within the envelope of their skills and experience. As a professional engineering organisation, they would not be saying they could do it if they genuinely believed they could.
Chair, for clarity, can I just check? Because I think I understand what you're saying is you want those assurances and you want all that detail through in the business case. Is that
absolutely?
Yeah.
My point.
That's where I'm moving towards.
Yeah.
What we're hoping to avoid.
Exactly, my question is coming from the perspective of the report before you as Cabinet tomorrow and before us today as Scrutiny contained a range of assurances that it's fine. It can be done within the financial envelope, it can be done within the time frame. There are numerous internal contradictions in the report, for example, as to what the time frame is, or whether the works need to be completed before structurally, before the library and so forth, which is a concern that you've not picked those up. But specifically, there is a major financial risk if the Stronger Towns funding cannot be transferred or cannot be spent within the time frame, and we know that those are hard deadlines. That March 25 deadline is a hard deadline. because it appears that there are millions of pounds of structural work that has to be done for this building before the library can go into it, and the Stronger Towns money is for the library, that represents a really significant financial risk to the council, and to my mind, it's not adequately explored in the decision report before you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the Stronger Towns Fund elements of this from committee members? Councillor Proctor.
Can we have some understanding of at what stage the library would need to be designed within the timeline, and what process and consultation you might go through to make sure that what you want it to be?
Yeah, so obviously what we'll need to do is obviously go through the relevant REBA stages, and as part of that, obviously we'll need to include that with regard in terms of the specification. So it'll be around about sort of REBA stage 2-ish, is it, that we sort of get that. But obviously that we have done engagement and consultation as part of the May Lords as well, and that will continue with that. So that'll be users, that'll be stakeholders, cultural partnership, the stakeholders, the Stronger Towns Board members, the public in terms of that, which will obviously feed into the design of the library.
I guess just to add, so we've already procured some library design fit out specialists in order to kind of support the design fit out of Maylord orchards. So we've got kind of specialists that design libraries across the country, and ultimately what people will want to see in Shire Hall in terms of services, content, activity will be the same, in terms of the drivers for what we want to provide in Shire Hall. It's about then how the space can be designed to make that best possible. So obviously there'll be consultations with the design of the development business case, but work done to date isn't completely lost. It's not starting again. We know what people want to see and how that space can be best used to deliver that.
So part of the argument for going to Shire Hall is that you can do additional things there. So by its nature, you can't have asked people what they wanted to do in that space.
I guess it's the core. So a modern library service isn't just about books. It's about kind of groups being able to access things. It's about kind of different kind of disadvantaged groups or people with disabilities and other things being able to come in and use their space for different kinds of activities. So we know what the activities are. We now need to look at how Shire Hall can best accommodate that within the footprint of Shire Hall instead. I guess one of the benefits that we've felt through doing the review is that you've got a grander environment and building and space in order to be able to design out and deliver that kind of level of experience in Shire Hall, and that's one of the things that the designers can help us work through.
Thank you. Any further questions on that? Right. Shall we move on to suitability of the building? Anybody got any questions on this topic? I do. Okay. So paragraph 13 on page 32 talks about the vision of creating a modern and accessible learning centre. Councillor Bowman at the political group consultation on Monday, you acknowledged that there are certainly accessibility issues with the Shire Hall. Users have to go up a large number of steps to get to the building in the first place, and then to get into the Assembly Hall, lift accessible. Accessibility is a key issue, since data from Herefordshire shows that libraries are particularly well used by the very young and the older sections of the population. So I think this is an absolutely crucial element. I note that an equality impact assessment has been published, but unfortunately it was only published at 9:10 this morning. Therefore, members of this committee probably haven't had a chance to read it yet. And I note for the record that it's disappointing that relevant information is published so late, and I hope that doesn't happen again. I'd like to explore this question of accessibility, though. A library needs to be warm and welcoming, an environment that brings people in, and I think from the way that you've talked about it, that is part of your vision. However, you've also talked about the Shire Hall this morning as being a very imposing building. Mr. Allenby has just talked about it being a grand environment. And the report itself talks in a couple of places about the gravitas of the building. What evidence do we have that a building that is imposing, grand and has gravitas is the ideal location for a public service that needs to reach out to the very young and the older sections of the population, and indeed to encourage new users? Might it not be off-putting other than inviting?
And clearly it could be off-putting if it wasn't done professionally and made into being a welcoming place. If you were to go to Shire Hall today and walk up the steps and go in, all of those things, the grand, the gravitas, and imposingness would be there, but it wouldn't be welcoming at all, because it is the decorations and the various things that are going on there. It's a very foreboding environment. But if when it's been designed and professionally fitted out by interior designers and by others, I believe that we have to strive to get it to be a most welcoming space, and that people are looking forward to go, especially the 7-year-olds or something of that nature, rather than the adults. I think that we want to be a welcoming space. The undercroft will be slightly different. I mean, that's we've got one area we could use for young persons, and then we've got lots of space and lots of other activities that can go on in some of those other rooms on the ground floor. But it has to be designed and thought about rather than hope that they get it right. I mean,
indeed, it does.
It's a bit early down the road to actually say what that vision is. I mean, we need to know that we can afford to do this, and that's why we're putting a business case together.
We absolutely do need to know that we can afford to do this, and we don't have the information to reach that decision yet. But we would agree, therefore, that the imposingness of the building is something that might need to be overcome. Councillor Lester wanted first, you know.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's imposing in the sense that it's an amazing building. And, you know, to think about using this building for a library and learning centre, one of the most educational and beneficial things about centering the library here is the fact that it's a huge historic asset. It speaks volumes about our history and our traditions and our culture, and we need to make sure that we're showcasing that building for the benefit of everyone, so that we can use it as that wonderful cultural asset that it is and celebrate it. And I can think of no greater advertisement for the value of listed buildings and the buildings that were made in a different era, where we can showcase it, celebrate it, and use it as the type of building that it deserves, you know, give it the use that it deserves. And you know, you've got other libraries in other places. We've got great libraries around the county, and they're different buildings, different venues, and they serve the same purpose. But we have got a county library concept here that we can showcase, and an iconic building that we can use for learning and as a learning centre. And I think that what better way to highlight the importance of our history and our historic buildings by welcoming people into a learning space, an educational space, and showcasing it for what it is, which is a grand building, absolutely, but if it's that positive learning space as well, and it puts the concept of a library on the pedestal that deserves for the building of that size, then that's going to be a very welcoming thing for residents of Herefordshire and tourists and visitors to Herefordshire.
Thank you, Chair. I remember doing my OU degrees many years ago, and going into places like the British Library and others, which are imposing, but actually I say inspirational. And that's what I believe very much by putting the library into Shire Hall will be. It will inspire our younger people, and of all age groups, to go there, to learn, to converse, and to join with others.
Architecturally, I would say that the British Library is closer to Maylords than to the Shire Hall, to be honest. But
we disagree on that one.
Spatially, I think that we could have that discussion. Councillor Hitchener.
Yeah,
Councillor Chaz, you began by mentioning about the equality impact assessment. I've only read the first section, and I just question whether this is actually what is required, because it begins, it says, an assessment is being made of the suitability under Crockman Assembly Hall, Shire Hall, relocation of the new Hereford Library, whereas the decision which is being made is cancelling the Maylord project. So I think this assessment perhaps ought to be looking at the decision which is going to be made rather than the decision which is potentially going to be made in 2 or 3 months' time. Perhaps that might just be considered, please.
With your request to
just to make sure that the right question has been asked, because this doesn't appear to be addressing the decision which is going to Cabinet tomorrow, but a different decision further down the line.
Something for Cabinet members to bear in mind when they're deliberating tomorrow. Thank you. So continuing on the, yeah.
Just to clarify, because there seems to be some bases with questions, shall we say. I think what you're saying there, Councillor Hitchener, is this is referring to the decision to base the library at Shire Hall, and actually what we should be looking at, we need an equality impact assessment on the decision to cancel the Maylords contract. And there isn't a form that says that goes into that particular decision.
So we can certainly kind of review and produce a form which considers that. I guess what the two assessments that have been done was trying to compare like for like to an equality impact assessment, which has been done already for Maylord Orchards as part of the full business case for Maylord Orchards options against. Would there be any impact from delivering the service in Shire Hall instead? We can look at whether there is a relative difference between it not being in Maylord Orchards as opposed to Shire Hall. I guess from a building kind of access and service point of view, we expect the services to be the same in Shire Hall in terms of the things and range of services that would be available. In terms of physical access, the library in Maylord Orchards would be on the second or the first floor of the building, but with lift and access. And there would be there's currently a lift that enables people to get into assembly hot rooms and the undercroft within Shire Hall, and that would be further enhanced through the design of the Shire Hall building. But we can write that out if that would be.
I think it's the fact that there's a statutory requirement to create that form for this decision. I think that's the point you're making, Councillor Hitchener, I think.
Yes, so the decision in front of the Cabinet tomorrow is to cancel Maylords. It's not to put the library into the Shire Hall. It's to do a full business case for putting the library into the Shire Hall, and then there will be a separate decision in October as to whether that is actually done. And therefore the equality impact assessment needs to be for the report in front of Cabinet tomorrow, which is cancelling Maylords.
Well, so the word goes on and talks about a decision to pause section, so maybe that's ahead of a decision then to pause rather than cancel. That might maybe John Chedsoy. Speculation.
Although we'll take that away and review that as part of the discussion here today. Obviously, we'll take that away.
Thank you.
Straight away this afternoon and look at that.
Thank you. It would be very useful to clarify that. I have some more questions on accessibility, but yes, Councillor.
Talking of decisions, will full council have a say in the change of direction of this project? Will full council have a say?
Councillor Bramer or Councillor Lester?
Just through what you would say.
But if the business case, well, when the business case comes forward from the Shire Hall, if that alters the capital requirement that needs to be spent on the Shire Hall to address the issues to refurbish the building, if that is in excess of the monies that are already assigned for the capital programme for the Shire Hall, that will require an alteration to the capital programme. That must be decided by full council.
Thank you, Councillor Lester.
And for clarification, we already know that it will require an alteration to the capital programme, so it will have to come to full council. The question is whether there will be an alternative that isn't nothing available to full council at that point. Returning to the point about the suitability of the building, energy efficiency. So the library has to be a warm and welcoming space, and indeed many libraries and other places have an important function in helping people in the cost of living crisis through the winter, keep them warm. Will it be possible to heat the rooms adequately? who had served as councillors will recall many pleasing moments in the Shire Hall.
I'll take that if I may. I remember many a time that the Shire Hall was unheated, and I do remember the times when we suggested that perhaps it should be heated, particularly for council meetings, but I don't think they ever tried to do it. But one of the things that will be done, and a new set of boilers will be installed. Today, boilers are much more efficient than they were. I can speak with personal knowledge of listed buildings, and indeed, in my business, I have castles and stately homes, all of which are heated so that people in the finery can sit and dine without needing to get up and dance to keep warm. So I can say that it's perfectly possible.
You own castles?
Yes, I do. Only 2 castles, but I've got. Sorry?
And how many stately homes?
7. It's my business. I'm in wedding venues. There's nothing, not to be. I'm not making a point, but just I do have. For the last 40 years, I've been in the entertainment industry, where I've been holding venues, changing venues that have been derelict into places like I see the Shire Hall becoming.
So you're committed to ensuring that it's well heated?
Yes, indeed, I am committed, and it's a lot easier to do it today than it was 30 years ago, because
although architecturally it's quite a difficult space being so large.
Well, the space is large, but you just have to have a boiler and an efficient heating system. It's certainly not impossible. Obviously, if the cost per unit of gas goes to £50 per unit as opposed to whatever it is, 30 pence or 50 pence or something, it will be quite expensive. But nevertheless, to make use of the buildings, everybody is going to have to be the same.
Yeah. But we don't know the cost because the revenue cost calculations have not been done yet.
Correct.
Right. Councillor Proctor.
So I think by implication in the cost of bringing the Shire Hall up to scratch, some things have not been included, like energy efficiency, refurbishment, heritage glazing, photovoltaic cells, that sort of thing. I would imagine that if we're talking about a future asset for the city, that we would actually want to factor in decarbonisation of the building and making everything as energy efficient as possible. Is that, am I right?
It depends at what stage we're going to take this, but the building itself will have to be made energy efficient. But of course, there's a lot of windows. You could say there's 500 windows maybe in Shire Hall, and to get it for the library activity, we need to look at 50 of them. You know, you could then say this is where some of that other monies of the £7.5 million was coming from, because it was there to do it all to a standard on day one. But for the library transfer, if we were to use Shire Hall, it would be that obviously a small percentage of them would be needed for the undercroft and for the auditorium, as opposed to all of the other rooms in the building. Obviously, if people wish to put a cafeteria together, well, of course, then you'll need a few more windows now. As you work around the building, as things are introduced, it would eventually all be possible to be done with triple glazing and with a decent boiler system. It's not the end of the world to do it, and you have to do it in order for the public to come, whether it's a library or any place you don't have to do it. It's a council meeting where the people are summoned to appear, and the council have to be there, otherwise they're going to pay.
So, just so I understand, so you're definitely not talking about kind of you in this initial capital investment, not talking about decarbonising buildings as a whole. Would there then be a plan or strategy to decarbonise the building over time?
There could be.
But what is your view about the desirability of that plan?
I'm only interested in the use of Shire Hall for a library, for the use by the public, and it being a welcoming and warm environment. the debates about decarbonisation are, perhaps we could speak to our local MP, who's the minister for that purpose. In the same, well, which,
the Minister in the Department for Transport.
With responsibility for decarbonisation.
Decarbonisation is much broader than transport, and his role there is irrelevant to the Shire Hall.
yeah, absolutely, but this question about decarbonisation is one that's not. I wouldn't confuse that with this particular project. We're able to heat, light, and make warm that building, and it's something that is done, has to be done in all buildings of that size that are brought back into public use.
But if I may,
yes.
on the point, even if we were not debating about where the library's going, the council was inevitably going to have a debate and discussion and a decision to be made about the use of the Shire Hall, as it is with all council buildings. And we are focused here, as Councillor Braham said, is on the library project, on restoring the building so it can be used. But with all of our assets, longer term, we have to meet lots of objectives that make the buildings so that they will be used in the right way, in an environmentally friendly way. And, the longer term, think about 5, 10, 20, 30 years time, all of our buildings are going to have to meet all kinds of standards, of which you've mentioned one of them. And that is a longer term plan that the council must implement. But how and when that is done is a great ask, because it requires investment, but we will have to make these investments with all of our buildings in future. So that will form part of the life and use of the Shire Hall moving forward, as with all buildings.
Councillor Lester, I'm grateful to Councillor Proctor for raising this question, because it is really important. As you know, this council is unanimously committed to moving to net zero carbon. That is also the legal obligation of the country as a whole. We are on a trajectory to be net zero as a council by 2030. And we have a carbon management plan in place to do that, and we have a commitment to ensuring that all of our buildings move in that direction. Is it not then not just sensible but vital that if we're proposing new building works, that they take the opportunity to bring buildings into as good a state in terms of energy efficiency as possible and as low as possible carbon emissions? And I'm concerned to note that Councillor Stoddart earlier said that the PV on the roof was one of the things that had been removed from the proposed set of costings, when of course that pays for itself extremely quickly. Are you committed? Are you committed to this council's net zero goals? And will you ensure that any proposals to rejuvenate the Shire Hall bring the building up to as good an energy efficiency standard as possible, as soon as possible, because it saves money in the long run?
Not to put recommendations on the table on behalf of this committee, but I think that would be an excellent recommendation for this committee to put forward, so that we can deal with that as a formal recommendation. That's up to the committee, not me.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yes. I think you can be assured that it will be.
I'd be very happy to recommend that.
Thank you.
I suppose for me it raises issues of cost, and that will be the business case, presumably. How on earth do we need that huge space to make it so that people can use the building, between 8 in the morning and 9 at night, or whatever. But I'm sure that will be covered in the cost, because we don't want to end up being lumbered with a library which we can't afford because of the running costs.
Which again emphasises the difficulty of, the unwiseness of making a decision to cancel a bird in the hand on the basis of something that we don't even know the costs. I have another question relating to the suitability of the building, and this time relating to acoustics, which are, I would suggest, an issue that needs careful attention. I note that the proposal to put the library in the Shire Hall envisages the children's library being in the Assembly Hall, which is a very large and echoey space. What consideration has been given to the question of how to deal with the acoustic implications of such a design? Bramer, this is after all your project.
The acoustics are well known to be very difficult in the assembly room. I think they're better than the cathedral, but not much. And basically, we need some design coming forward from somebody this is their field. I don't think at this stage we've even got a list of sound engineers who might help us, but this is what we need to do in order to do something to attenuate the sound and echoing in Shire Hall. But it's got to be done, but it's one of the things that would have to be done whatever the use of the building was. But, sorry, Peter, you go on.
Thank you. I've done a couple of projects recently, including some MOD ones. In large buildings, they tend to use the sound backlogs, which are the vertical hanging bars to do that. But it can be done without significant cost. But as I say, that's the examples I've seen. But I'm sure there are many other innovative ways than doing it in that building.
Can I just come in as well? Acoustic survey has been done previously, but obviously it's not in line with the library, so absolutely that will be undertaken as part of the next full business case.
Yeah.
And that will be fed into that.
And again, this is the sort of detail, proposal to put a whole load of children into a space that's supposed to be warm and welcoming and encouraging for them, but is extremely echoey and very open plan with other uses might raise some concerns which haven't yet been addressed.
Yeah, and we can address those. And obviously there were acoustic as well as part of the mailers that we had to review as well. Obviously being upstairs, that was part of the review of that. So absolutely.
I have, yeah.
I think one of the problems at the big assembly hall is the solid floor. I know when we used to use it before, people walking up and down echoed all over the place. Some decent flooring in there. Plus the fact that it's going to be full of books, which will themselves provide sound deadening, I'm sure. Plus a few of these baffles up in the ceiling. I'm sure it can be done at a reasonable cost. And can I just ask if part of the heating system, are we looking at partially or fully heat pumps? Is it suitable for that, do you suppose?
There's a very detailed report on that from November 2022.
As I know that there is a debate regarding ground source heat pumps, if this is what you're referring to. I don't know the answer to it. There will be people much better qualified than anybody in this room to answer that question. I wouldn't wish to give my own views other than to say that that's...
Social officer, one alone.
Yeah, well, other than to say it's, at the moment there is a debate as to whether these devices are. I know, for example, as in my church, it was chucked out by the board of governors, if you like, or by the diocesan council, because it didn't appear to give them the degree of flexibility they required. Other places have got them.
I think we're straying away from the question of the Shire Hall, but your question, Councillor Baker, is will that be addressed in the full business case, perhaps? Lovely, thank you.
There'll be a range of studies, I think, done. I think one of the things just got to bear in mind is it's a Grade 2 listed building as well, and there will be some restrictions around what you can do in a Grade 2 listed building, but heating a space and some of the structural kind of questions have also obviously been looked at for the museum. So the museum's double height art galleries that needs to be heated. We'll be looking at things like air movement, as well as kind of retaining and using the heat circulation in the building. So the structural integrity of the floor in terms of taking books and different uses will be looked at. So these are all kind of points of detail that we plan to pick up in the full business account.
Thank you. I have a final substantive question relating to planning permission. Anybody else got questions? And then I suggest we move to drafting recommendations. There's the question of planning permission and whether this will be required is mentioned in a number of places, paragraph 43, paragraph 45, paragraph 48. The information is not entirely consistent in that it appears, my best reading of it, is that listed building consent will be required for anything that's done in Shire Hall. Can you confirm that is the case, Councillor Bramer?
No, definitely not. I can't confirm that will be the case. It's a possibility that it could be, and that's why it's been referred to as being likely to be wanted.
And we have
generally, I mean, we have team of planners who can advise us, but generally repairs to listed buildings, like putting the tiles back on the roof and doing things in relation, if it's just repairing plaster because of damp and so on, these don't require listed building consent because they're repairs. That's always been the remit of the planning organisation, unless the building is going to change of use. And it isn't, according to my advice. But I don't. All I'm saying, I think the report is saying, is that these things could be required, and it's better to allow time for them than not. But it isn't the case that they're definitely required. And we have a team of planners, if you can doubt my word on that.
I'm not doubting your word. I'm simply pointing out that the report talks about this in 3 different places and gives slightly contradictory information, so it wasn't entirely clear to me. It looked like it was saying listed building consent would be required for whatever was done, and planning permission might also be required depending on the scale of the alterations. Is there anybody in the room or on screen who can clarify on that?
Sorry, the listed building consent, if any alterations are to the historic or architectural historic significance of the building, they would require listed building consent. With regard to a material change of use of the building from whatever it is now to a library and learning centre, the advice we've been given from officers categorically is no, they don't need a change of use because there's no material change of use in the way the use class order is currently. There's no, it's not like you're going from a bookshop to a fast food takeaway. You're going from one civic use to another civic use, so that's covered there. But with regard to listed building consent, it obviously determines on the design of the infrastructure to facilitate the library, and so that will be done in full consultation with the planning and listed buildings officers, and so we will be able to get a better steer on that. Once the design phase is something that we're aware of, then we can address the issue of what listed building consent would be. I noted the inconsistencies in the report, and I did ask them to be changed, so I apologise for the fact that those changes weren't made.
I guess it might just be worth adding in terms of the timeline you mentioned before does include allowance for the current timescales for a major planning application and listed building consent. So that 26 weeks is the time frame, the standard national time frames for that full. So if it's required, it's built into that time frame.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Army. Right, if there are no further questions from members of the committee, I think that draws us to a close in terms of questions. We now move to elaboration of any recommendations that we might wish to make and or any statements. Mr. Webb, can you advise, this is my first time chairing one of these meetings, is it normal at this moment to kind of go into a quiet room to come up with some text?
It depends on what you're comfortable doing. You could do it here in the office present, you could ask the officers to leave, you could have a small adjournment if you in a private environment. As long as you bring those recommendations back on camera, then I think that you satisfy the remit of the committee. So it's really up to you how you want to play, Chair.
Okay, well, in general, I'm in favour of transparency of decision making, so I'm happy to assist in the room and online and so forth, unless there's something that we find we need to discuss as a committee. Who have some suggestions for recommendations to the executive? So we can recommend that they consider specific additional information or action to inform their decision making. Councillor O'Driscoll.
I'd like to second effectively the proposal you made earlier under the recommendations A, B, C, D on page 30, that we recommend that A and B are deleted, and that hopefully the decision to Cabinet tomorrow is that a full business case for Shire Hall development to be progressed, reported back to Cabinet in October 23, at which point there will be a decision to be made between two level, I would have thought, or two equal projects. So the decision can be made as whether it's to continue with the library as planned currently at Maylords, with any additional costs that may need to be taken into consideration because of the delay to the timescale on one side, and the new business case for Shire Hall on the other, so that, as you rightly said earlier, we're not in a situation where it's take this or nothing, but there are two options on the table that can be properly scrutinised, and Cabinet and maybe full council can come to an informed decision.
Thank you, Councillor Driscoll. I think I can see nods around that one. Do you need to write the phrasing now, or
That's been captured on.
has somebody written that down?
We captured that, so I'll repeat it back.
You captured that, okay.
Yeah.
Do we vote on our recommendations as we go through them? Is that the convention?
I would suggest first that perhaps you read table any of
Table all
suggested
recommendations,
recommendations and
okay.
see how it fits.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
William,
Due to the Shire Hall being a larger venue with greater scope for a civic centre to promote learning and education, the decision to opt the Shire Hall by the executive should strive to improve the library offer beyond what was envisaged in Maylord's Orchards. Is that clear?
so that sounds to me not like a recommendation that relates explicitly to this decision, because this decision is about about the reorientation of the library. That sounds like exploring some of the additional ideas. Would that be covered anyway in development of the full business case? I'm looking to Clark to advise on that.
I don't know what the contents of the full business case will be, but that's some of the vision and objectives that have been identified in the papers today.
I think if it helps, the Strong Towns Board and the review itself has said that we think we could deliver enhanced outcomes, so we will make sure that in the full business case report we're very clear as to what those advanced outcomes would be.
Okay, that covers your.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so that really feeds the.
But presumably we could make recommendations for what we might think could be usefully included in the business case, like, for example, looking at the carbon footprint that we're reducing. And so that would also feel sensible. It feels like we might want to make some recommendations about the business case.
Okay, yeah, yes.
I'd like to recommend that we ask the business case consider the carbon footprint of the building and how investment in the building can reduce the carbon footprint.
In line with existing council commitments. Yeah, fantastic. And so do we want to specify the full business case should consider considering potential for further developments is a bit vague, isn't it? Because then we'll just get a list of, there could be poetry readings, but kind of no detail. So consider the potential for costs of and likelihood of funding for expanded services. That sound all right? So does that cover what you talked about, Councillor William?
Oh, I read it out clear enough. It was pretty clear what I said. Thank you.
Would you like to repeat that, Councillor William?
Sorry, do you want to read out again?
Would you like to repeat that?
Well, what I read out at the start, due to the Shire Hall being a larger venue with greater scope for a civic centre, promoted learning and education, if the decision is adopted for the Shire Hall, the executive should strive to improve the library offer beyond what was envisaged in Maylord Orchards.
That's assuming a kind of predetermined. I think we can rephrase it to request that the FPC explores the potential for further development of further services. Yeah. Further recommendations.
Could we just clarify about the decarbonisation?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to set ourselves a target that's not achievable. So rather than saying it's got to be totally carbon neutral at this stage, could be a bit impossible. We wouldn't be able to do that. Possibly.
Well, the recommendation, the wording that Councillor Proctor has suggested is that the full business case should consider how decarbonisation can be achieved in line with existing council commitments, which is net zero by 2030. That doesn't mean absolutely no carbon out of the building, because of course offsetting is a mechanism that is envisaged in our carbon management plan to deal with residual carbon.
We didn't have to be setting ourselves a target that wasn't achievable. Mm-hmm. If that's if what you're saying, don't put us on the spot, really.
Although given the existing, the current status of climate change in the world generally, we might want to redouble our efforts.
Trying to make a 300-year-old building carbon neutral is getting.
Can we just clarify this building is 205 years old? There's a number of pages been banted about today, 205 years old.
Older now.
206, I think it's right. Councillor Driscoll.
One, just reiterating what I said before, that members of the cultural community, the performance community, the courtyard, etc., are properly consulted with the business plan to ensure that any new performance space that's envisaged at the Shire Hall is not going to be detrimental to the current ecology.
Thank you. That was the 1 o'clock alarm. Can I have members' agreement to continue the meeting for a further few minutes so that we finish? Thank you very much. Do we want to make a recommendation regarding what regarding exploration or clarification of what the alternative plan would be for Maylords if the library were to go into the Shire Hall?
Yeah.
It would be useful to have that, would it not? Yeah. And I would like to make a clear recommendation that the evidence base underpinning any future papers that come on this subject, and indeed that come to this committee, should all be published in full detail and in good time. Particularly financial information. And particularly when explicitly requested by the committee.
Recommendation to cabinet.
Yeah, that they ensure that their reports include all of the information required.
But cabinet don't produce reports, obviously, it's the council office.
Well, perhaps the cabinet could ensure that officers produce reports that have got the full information. I mean, what we have here is a report that doesn't have any financial information in it and doesn't respond to the financial viability and value for money elements of its own terms of reference.
I think it would be the recommendation is consent reports that come to you, and obviously it's the officers of the council that produce those reports. So the recommendation would go to us as officers in terms of the information that we supply to you, not cabinet. Cabinet obviously don't produce reports. So it's a broader recommendation around timeliness of reporting. Then I would list that generally to council, namely Herefordshire Council rather than Council Capital C.
Thank you, Daniel, for the clarification. I defer to you. Your advice on that. Please can we ensure that the full business case? Yeah, I remain concerned that the review didn't respond fully to its own terms of reference. So please can we ensure that whatever report is produced for the next stage of this process does cover all of those details. That's how to best phrase that.
This issue about the risk, they are described. The council meetings tomorrow, somebody will be rerouted by then. I don't know whether just to drop it, officers can just note that if the risk, clearly stating what the risks are, rather than I don't know whether you want to take that as a recommendation or just leave it.
Yes. Daniel, can you advise? So we've got a couple of points here that aren't recommendations to the cabinet as such, but are recommendations about the quality of reports underpinning.
If there was a recommendation, then I would draft a narrative. We don't necessarily do this in the meeting since it's in the meeting tomorrow. That you've got a narrative and some of the concerns that you have, and you include that as part of your reported back to cabinet tomorrow alongside the recommendation.
Okay. I'll draft a narrative that I will include tomorrow, and the recommendation completely stand with the committee recommended that officers that reports ensure that they accurately and fully respond to the subheadings that they're supposed to be about. Is that okay? Great. Thank you. Any further recommendations that we would care to make, committee members? Right. Do we vote on them on block? Or one by one?
It's okay on directive, maybe if consensus then on block.
Do we have consensus in those recommendations? Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. Okay, I've probably got some notes about how to officially end this meeting, so bear with me a second. I'd like to thank very much all of the cabinet members, members of the committee, officers, and members of the council and general public who attended online and via YouTube for your interest and your contributions to those answered questions. I'll be presenting a report from the committee at the cabinet meeting tomorrow, and thank you very much for your consideration of our questions and comments and suggestions for cabinet. And
We'll email Councillor Harvey saying we need a recommendation to publish the equality impact assessments, para 38 on page 56, states already existing for the cabinet meeting tomorrow.
The recommendation, which
the equality impact assessment, that paragraph 38 on page 56 states already exist before the cabinet meeting tomorrow.
So the EIA that we've published today has also been published for cabinet for tomorrow.
Thank you for the reminder. This goes back to the point we raised that the EIA, this document, I haven't had a chance to read through the case so late, doesn't actually respond to the topic of the condition.
We're just getting that clarified at the moment because we have also got one from the move in terms of Fire Street, so that may well cover what you're suggesting. So we've got one from Maylaws for Fire Street and for this Shire Hall, so we're just confirming that with our police officer at the moment.
Okay. So we have a record.
You've raised it.
Okay. Can that be recorded as a recommendation from the committee, and is that unanimously agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Right.
So just to be absolutely clear, the question cabinet considers an impact, equality impact assessment of the potential condition to terminate mayor boards.
Yeah, we request that an EIA is published for the decision that is in front of cabinet tomorrow, i.e. the proposed decision to cancel mayor boards. Because that is not what this EIA wants.
No, just a record.
Could we confirm that? Because like I said, it might be that the EIA is actually going to be covered as a part of the move to Fire Street, which ultimately is the council, so it could be all incorporated.
Okay, if officers publish a report that you say answers, responds to our recommendation, then you'll provide an explanation of why you feel that responds to our recommendation. But yeah.
Then I would suggest as well that having an AIA included, that you suggest simply that any EIA included decisions.
Yes, but the point is that we are not yet assured that the 3 EIAs that have been referred to actually fulfil the statutory requirement for an EIA of the decision, the 4-part recommendations that is in front of the cabinet tomorrow. I need a cancellation of the mailing project. We're not yet assured that an EIA has been completed on that decision.
We've just literally had confirmation through from the equality officer that she's saying it's not necessary. The EIA that we've got for moving to the Fire Street, for the Shire Hall and the Vaylord is sufficient to cover the decision that we've got here today.
Okay, I expect that will be something questioned by colleagues at the cabinet meeting tomorrow. Yeah.
So do you want that recommendation to draw?
I think it's a recommendation that we agree. We've had a verbal assurance that it's not required, but it's still a recommendation from this committee.
Could Chair suggest we could say that the cabinet considers the position in terms of necessity of an IA in respect of potential decision to terminate? We can't think that something's provided to the committee, but it's up to cabinet to be assured that it's had that.
Sorry, no, it's not. No, Councillor Harvey isn't a member of this committee. This committee needs assurance that an EIA has been produced for the decision in front of it, and it has not yet been assured by that. It's just been provided with one document less than an hour before the start of this meeting this morning. And so the recommendation from committee is that Cabinet ensure it is assured that an adequate EIA has been produced for the decision in front of them tomorrow. That's satisfactory. Thank you. Right, 8. Dates of future meetings. They are identified in the contents page in the agenda pack on page 4, and this shows the next schedule is Wednesday, the 13th of September 2023. Meetings of this committee going forward will be on the second Wednesday of the month at 10 a.m. Every other month. And I think that means we are finished for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. Can I have the live stream is turned off?